The sitting is open. I remind members that in order to be registered for the sitting, you should insert your badge when you take your seat and keep it inserted at least for 30 seconds. You should also insert your badge in order to speak or to vote. To request the floor, please also press the request button, but just once. The first item of business this morning is a current affairs debate with the title Migration to Europe. The debate will end at about 11 a.m. I remind members that the Assembly agreed on Monday that the speaking time in all debates today will be 3 minutes for spokespersons on political groups and 2 minutes for all other speakers. In the debate, I call Mrs. Sandra Sampa of Italy, who was chosen by the Bureau to open the debate. Sandra, you have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end of the debate. Please, the floor is yours.
Grazie signora Presidente, cari colleghi, intervengo in qualità di Presidente della Commissione sulla migrazione che ha chiesto che questo dibattito si tenesse e in qualità di rapporteur per la relazione e l'azione del Consiglio d'Europa per proteggere i diritti umani dei migranti, dei richiedenti asilo e dei rifugiati. La migrazione è una costante dell'umanità e rappresenta e ha sempre rappresentato una sfida, ma è anche una grande opportunità per i paesi di destinazione. Oggi è indubbiamente uno dei temi più sensibili e più controversi del dibattito politico. Possiamo dire che il fattore migrazione è un doping elettorale, anche perché viene utilizzato come strumento di consenso che si costruisce alimentando la paura e criminalizzando i migranti. Mentre invece la migrazione è un fenomeno complesso che esige di essere conosciuto, di essere compreso, gestito, tenendo conto di tutti gli aspetti in cui si colloca. Le guerre, le crisi internazionali, i cambiamenti climatici, il vuoto demografico, l'invecchiamento della popolazione, la povertà estrema, esigenze del mercato del lavoro. Un fenomeno che va gestito per quello che è. Si tratta di movimenti globali che non possono essere fermati erigendo muri e non saranno fermati erigendo muri, ma che va gestito attuando politiche efficaci, evitando semplificazioni, strumentalizzazioni, senza mai, lo ripeto 3 volte, sacrificare i valori fondanti dell'Europa, che sono il nostro volto e sono l'anima dell'Europa. Non bisogna mai perdere l'anima. L'esigenza di promuovere questo dibattito nasce da 2 passaggi avvenuti a livello europeo negli ultimi mesi: l'entrata in vigore del nuovo patto per la migrazione e l'asilo e l'adozione della dichiarazione di Chisinau. Entrambi questi passaggi sono delicati e necessitano di una riflessione seria e condivisa in questa Assemblea parlamentare, che è nata per tutelare e promuovere i diritti umani e lo Stato di diritto. Non mi soffermo sui contenuti del patto perché abbiamo un relatore generale, Lord German, che sta seguendo con attenzione le misure adottate e le quali dovranno essere attuate nel pieno rispetto del diritto d'asilo e di tutte le altre convenzioni che proteggono le persone nei contesti di migrazione, dalla Convenzione dei diritti del fanciullo a tutte le altre. Rispetto alla dichiarazione di Chisinau, alla Convenzione europea, all'intero sistema di cui siamo parte, consentitemi di fare una premessa. La Convenzione è uno scudo per tutti coloro che ricadono sotto la nostra giurisdizione, tra cui anche le persone straniere, i richiedenti asilo e i rifugiati che arrivano nel continente europeo. L'universalità dei diritti è nel DNA stesso del sistema della Convenzione. Se si inizia a metterla in discussione introducendo eccezioni per alcuni gruppi di persone, sappiamo bene qual è il rischio. La storia ce l'ha già mostrato con chiarezza dove si può andare a finire. Nella dichiarazione di Chisinau si sostiene la necessità di un'interpretazione aggiornata della Convenzione, ma è importante per me ricordare che l'unica autorità legittimata a fornire tale interpretazione è la Corte, che da sempre agisce in modo indipendente e senza interferenze. Questo deve restare il nostro punto di riferimento, lo Stato di diritto, non il mutevole orientamento dell'opinione pubblica, manipolabile sempre e tanto più oggi in presenza di potenti mezzi come sono i social e l'intelligenza artificiale. Questo deve restare il nostro punto e possono esserci diritti sacrificabili, non possono essere mai esserci diritti sacrificabili in nome della sicurezza nazionale. Per esempio, il divieto di trattamenti inumani e degradanti è un principio fondante della Convenzione, gli Stati sono tenuti a rispettarli. Ma difendere questo principio non significa fare sconti a nessuno, tantomeno agli autori di reati, nei cui confronti vanno assunte tutte le misure previste. Spetta a noi parlamentari, lasciate che lo dica con chiarezza, dimostrare una leadership politica salda. E il tema della sicurezza nelle nostre società sta a cuore a tutti noi, ma i migranti che arrivano sulle nostre coste non sono la causa della nostra insicurezza e non vanno presentati come una minaccia. Chi sostiene questi argomenti lo fa in maniera strumentale per ragioni di propaganda e confonde i piani, mentre noi decisori politici dovremmo essere i primi a evitare confusione, a considerare le conseguenze di tali messaggi fuorvianti su tutta la società, su noi stessi e sui nostri figli. Ancora, il principio di non refoulement si applica sempre, anche nel caso di flussi intensi verso il continente o in situazioni gravissime come quelle in cui i migranti vengono usati e strumentalizzati da stati terzi ostili. In tal senso mi preoccupa molto la nozione dei cosiddetti nuovi approcci. Voglio ricordare che il commissario Flaherty ci ha messo in guardia sui rischi per i diritti umani che le misure come i centri di rimpatrio o l'esternalizzazione delle procedure di asilo comportano e ha invitato a un approccio prudente. Spetterà alla Corte stabilire se tali schemi, una volta attuati, saranno conformi alla Convenzione. Io condivido questa linea e voglio ricordare che anche l'ONU ha richiamato gli stessi punti. Cari colleghi, c'è un altro fattore da considerare. Sottrarre spazio ai diritti e produrre paura usando il tema dei migranti alimenterà nelle nostre società un clima di tensione. Belfast è sotto gli occhi di tutti. Alimenterà un clima di tensione e di odio a danno di tutta la società. Non cadiamo in questa trappola. E lasciatemi concludere, spetta a noi, come ho detto, dimostrare una leadership politica e salda e quindi da un lato difendere l'applicazione coerente e rigorosa dei diritti umani sanciti dalla Convenzione e interpretati dalla Corte, dall'altra affrontare le sfide che il fenomeno migratorio ci pone e impegnarci a trovare soluzioni concrete, gestire i flussi, creare canali di ingresso efficaci, attuare politiche per l'integrazione delle persone straniere nei nostri territori, avendo come obiettivo la coesione sociale.
Thank you very much. We start the debate with the speakers on behalf of the political groups, and I first call Georgios Psychogogos on behalf of UEL.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And it's very important that our committee is bringing this issue to the plenary and the current affairs debate, because it's a subject that is everywhere around Europe and the world, and we have to take sides, we have to take positions, as we always do as politicians, and especially we in the Unified Left. Dear colleagues, the new EU Migration Pact, the asylum system and the return rules that were adopted from the European instruments previous days do not contribute, in our opinion, to the solution of this great and very complex issue. Because what they do is that they turn the first reception countries into open prisons. They put all the burden. They do not adopt relocation systems. They do not adopt common asylum and reception systems. They do not address the root causes that produce and lead somebody to evacuate its home. Do not also talk about integration. Second, they have the return hubs, and the return hubs, it's a huge, in third countries, huge detention centers that are held in countries that have not signed, ratified, or are obliged to abide by Geneva Convention or other international law. And the European Court of Human Rights, right near to us, has rejected this kind of policies and this kind of measures in Rwanda and in Albania. Seems that Europe forgot what led us after the Second World War crimes and tragedies to adopt these agreements, and also seems to forget what Robert Schuman is written outside this parliamentary assembly in a star on the road, that firstly, Europe is based on solidarity. Moreover, I was wondering what those colleagues in the European Parliament that were shouting, "Send them back," will say if they see the Mundial matches with the teams of their national teams having many and many migrant second or third generation in their first 11s. And about Chisinau Declaration, it was attempted to be instrumentalized, the European Convention of Human Rights, by countries for issues that cover only 0.7% of the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. It's a clear political target and purpose behind this. And we have to clarify that interior audiences looking for scapegoats for the increasing inequalities that the governments produce cannot be solved by IC in our streets. We don't accept IC in our streets, and we don't accept that the European Court Convention of Human Rights has exceptions.
Thank you very much.
International law has no exceptions. Right to life, dignity, and human treatment will prevail.
The next, on behalf of SOC, is Saskia Kluit.
Thank you very much, Chair. We do need a wake-up call, but not the one that has been dominating the political and cultural discourse. It's the one that I experience every day the time I leave my multicultural neighborhood. Because when I step out the door, I meet Moroccan women who teach our children in school. And I meet my neighbor who moved to the Netherlands from Turkey 35 years ago and built the trains I ride now every day. And when I go to the doctor, my blood is drawn by a Polish doctor. I step into a world that is not a new reality. It is not a reality that needs to be controlled by inhumane rhetoric and legislation. It is a reality that reflects deep European values of personal freedom and brotherhood. And it reflects the history of Europe because historically European nations have always absorbed migrating people and have always consisted of communities finding new equilibrium in a shared identity. A process that has brought Europe immense prosperity. No Spinoza, no Enlightenment without the Jewish people from Portugal. No ASML, a worldwide leading European chip factory company today, without educated employees from countries like India and Pakistan. The main question, therefore, is how do we keep building a society from values of pluriformity, rule of law, and all in human rights? Our commitment to the European Convention on Human Rights must remain unwavering, just as all member states reaffirmed in the Chisinau Declaration. Because the real danger of what we stand to lose with migration phobia, is first of all to lose our humanity, our own humanity. As the shameful images of the EU Parliament showed this week, where grown-up people were happily chanting "send them back" about children they want to send to prison in places where they have no relation with whatsoever. I am sure the world has noticed the cruelty that was shown in our Parliament this week. This negative focus on migration will also cause grave damages to the prosperity of our countries, because who will take care of our children? Who will take care of our parents? Who will transport our needs, build the chips of ASML, or feed our people in an aging continent with labor demands that we cannot fulfill ourselves, I ask. So yes, we should address problems, and we have the instruments, with social rights like housing and labor rights, with healthcare and also mental health care, and also, of course, with criminal pursuit when needed. But keeping healthcare away from migrants or bringing razzias or undocumented people to our streets will definitely not improve the safety of our peoples. It will only bring fear about the inhumanity of our governments that are supposed to take care of us. If this inhumane migration law will take effect, they will raise food prices, worsen labor shortages, and reduce care for our parents. it is a route to nowhere, because it will bring immense damage to our core European values like liberté, égalité et fraternité.
Thank you, and I'll call Belén Hoyo on behalf of EPP.
I will speak in Spanish. Como ha dicho la señora Zampa, la inmigración es uno de los grandes desafíos de nuestro tiempo y precisamente por eso merece algo mejor que eslóganes, simplificaciones o utilización política. Europa necesita una política migratoria que combine humanidad y responsabilidad. Una política que proteja la dignidad de las personas, pero también la seguridad de nuestras fronteras y el cumplimiento de nuestros deberes. Porque la realidad es evidente, nuestras sociedades necesitan inmigración legal, ordenada e integrada. Muchos de nuestros países afrontan retos demográficos, necesidades laborales y sectores económicos que requieren la aportación de trabajadores procedentes de otros lugares del mundo. La inmigración legal contribuye al crecimiento económico, al sostenimiento de nuestros sistemas de bienestar y al enriquecimiento de nuestras sociedades. Pero precisamente para preservar ese modelo debemos ser capaces de combatir con firmeza la inmigración irregular. No podemos aceptar que las mafias del tráfico de seres humanos sigan explotando la desesperación de miles de personas. No podemos resignarnos a que miles de personas, muchos de ellos menores, arriesguen sus vidas en rutas cada vez más complicadas y peligrosas. No podemos permitir que organizaciones criminales se beneficien económicamente del sufrimiento humano. Por eso Europa debe reforzar la cooperación con los países de origen y tránsito, mejorar el control de sus fronteras exteriores y garantizar mecanismos eficaces de retorno para quienes no reúnen las condiciones legales para permanecer en nuestros países. En este sentido, quiero decir que lamentablemente España no está siendo un ejemplo, porque no se está ni coordinando con el resto de países ni está siendo solidaria con el resto de Europa. Y en este sentido, varios países europeos se lo dijeron, tanto de gobiernos de derechas como de izquierdas, se lo dijeron la semana pasada al señor Sánchez. Si hablamos de seguridad, no es para estigmatizar a nadie, sino para recordar que los derechos van siempre acompañados de deberes y hay que respetar la ley en una condición esencial para la convivencia. Defender las fronteras no es incompatible con defender los derechos humanos. Al contrario, las fronteras seguras son también una herramienta de protección frente a las mafias, la explotación y la trata de personas. La identidad europea se fundamenta en la dignidad de la persona, el Estado de Derecho y el respeto a los derechos fundamentales, por supuesto. Esos principios deben guiarnos siempre, incluso en los debates más complejos. Por eso defendemos un modelo basado en la integración real. Quien decide establecerse en uno de nuestros países debe respetar nuestras leyes, conocer nuestras normas de convivencia y participar activamente en la sociedad. Y las instituciones públicas deben ofrecer oportunidades para que esa integración sea efectiva. La cohesión social, señorías, es uno de los bienes más valiosos de nuestras democracias y, desde luego, debemos protegerla. Gracias.
Thank you, and now we hear on behalf of ECPA, Bob de Brandaptere.
Dear colleagues, allow me to begin with a fundamental observation. Mass immigration to Europe is not a natural phenomenon, nor an inevitable fate that we must passively endure. It is the result of deliberate policy choices. And what policy has caused, policy can reverse. The public understands this. In every polls in our countries, we see the same thing. In mine, the Vlaams Belang is winning. In Austria, the FPÖ is huge. In Germany, the AfD. In France, the RN. Vox in Spain, Danish People's Party in Denmark, and so on. By voting for our parties, citizens send a clear message. They do not want to feel like strangers in their own country. They want social security to survive and remain reserved for those who have contributed to it. They want their mothers, their wives, and their daughters to feel safe in the streets. These are not extreme demands. They are the most natural aspirations in the world. Our message is clear. Mass migration must be stopped. And beyond that, remigration must begin. The so-called center-right. I want to tell you this. Stop letting the left guilt you into submission. This left has lost all touch with its own citizens. They speak of anti-fascism, Islamophobia, migrationophobia, that's a new one I learned today, and every fashionable anti-label imaginable. But what truly drives them is oikophobia, the contempt for their own culture, the contempt for their own people, their own civilization. And if they are anti-anything, they are anti their own people. Dear friends, we are the opposite. We stand for our people. And some results show that change is possible. The new return regulation is a small step forward. The Chisinau Declaration is not that. It solemnly reinstates migrants' rights, non-discrimination, and the living interpretation of the Convention while keeping border control and expulsion trapped in a dense web of judicial constraints. We must have the courage to go further. Closed external borders, pushback, and remigration of who don't want to fit in our societies. Development aid and trade agreements linked to the willingness of countries of origin to take back their nationals, and reception in the region of origin rather than on our continent. This is the bare minimum. This is not about statistics. It is about the future of our children and our grandchildren. Is it about ensuring that Europe remains European, and that is what we owe our children and grandchildren. To conclude, 30 years of mass migration has changed our society. No one asked for this. This experiment has failed spectacularly. So please stop trying to prove you were right by making matters even worse. Let us clean up this mess together and change the Council of Europe so it reconnects with our societies. Otherwise, in the very near future, our societies may decide that this organization is no longer needed.
Mrs. Saskia Kluit uses her blue card to ask a question. So you have 30 seconds.
First of all, my party is left-wing, pro-humanity, and the biggest in the country, growing with most members. So it's ridiculous to state what you state. It is by far the worst speech ever made in this parliament, I would say. My question is, you talk about social security. However, would you like to pay for social security when 1 in 2 needs to pay for people on pension without migration? Are you speaking about people having to work until they're 85?
Mr. Brambanteri, if you would like to answer, you have also 30 seconds for an answer.
Yeah, very shortly. Okay, your party might be the biggest, but when I look at all right...
Could you please stand up?
When I look at all right-wing parties in your country, altogether they're still bigger than you are. And on top of that, I am from Brussels. And a couple of years ago, there was a study done in Brussels. 9 out of 10 people who are living off the social benefits in Brussels, they're of a migrant background. They are not helping us pay this, not at all.
Next one on the list now on behalf of ALDE is Michael German.
Can I start by saying that I think most people in this hall will have been descended from a migrant somewhere in their lives and in their past. And secondly, the OECD has produced the evidence, real money, real figures, which show that migration contributes to our society, not the other way around. It may take some time before it happens, but the contribution of migrants is very important to all of our growth in our economies. I want to turn to the Chisinau Declaration because it was, of course, a political declaration. It was not a series of rules, of new rules to be created. And obviously, in a political declaration, they would have some ambiguities, some inconsistencies. For example, on the issue of torture, it says on the one hand that the freedom from torture is absolute, but later on in the same document it says that if you're considering torture in other countries, you must set a high bar. There's a difference between absolute and high bar, but we must recognize that this is a statement in order to give political progress to be able for the countries of Europe to be able to move forward. But it also means, of course, that there are now pressures that come out of the outcome of that, which is all about externalization. Just this week, 19 European countries, from Denmark to Romania, from Slovenia to Sweden have written to the European Commission saying they want to encourage expediting the whole area of externalising some of their work. Now, externalisation has three phases. One of them is prevention of arrival. Secondly, external processing of claims. And thirdly, removal to a third state. And it's that third one, which of course in any sensible removal scheme would be related to people who have failed to make the case and been failed for protection in the country that they've arrived at. So failed asylum seekers seeking to go to a third country. I must say, first of all, that I'm ashamed of the European Commission accepting the Taliban this week. This week, on Tuesday, 5 Taliban were invited to come to the European Commission to be able to start the process of being able to send people back to Afghanistan. I don't think there's anybody in this chamber who would want to send any woman back to Afghanistan at all. So we have to be very careful indeed, and all three of these externalisation procedures will make life even difficult for the human tragedy we face. We have to remember that third countries are not going to be cheap. It will come very expensive. So before you hand over the swag bags to other countries and looking for third countries, you must remember that human rights are not a reward for good behaviour. They are held equally by everyone by virtue of our shared humanity. That's why we need to make sure we stick with our Bible, which is the European Convention on Human Rights.
Thank you very much. There is a request for a blue card question. Please, Mr. de Brandebere.
I have a very simple question for you, sir. Imagine if an Afghan refugee is in our country, rapes a couple of girls. You do not think that we should have the right to send him back to Afghanistan?
If you would like to respond, please, Mr. German.
I'm sorry?
You can respond if you want for 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds, first of all, if you are a criminal, you should be treated by the law equally. And that means that you should not be, that should not happen. And of course, it is possible for people to be sent back to their countries if they have actually committed a crime as serious as you say. But of course, painting everybody by the brush of one or two people is not an adequate way of measuring the success that migrants have brought to our communities and to our economies.
I continue now with the list of the other speakers who have 2 minutes each. And the first on my list is Mr. Antonio Gutiérrez Limones from Spain.
I'm going to speak Spanish. El gobierno de España, Pedro Sánchez, está haciendo lo correcto, cumplir con los valores que representa el Consejo de Europa, el Estado de Derecho, los derechos humanos y la dignidad de los migrantes. Queridos colegas, aunque la declaración de Chisinau es una declaración política y no un instrumento vinculante, me preocupa el mensaje que transmite. En particular, los retornos y los centros de retorno, porque presentan la migración como un problema de control y seguridad y no como una cuestión de derechos humanos. Cuando hablamos de estos centros, hablamos de personas, hombres, mujeres y niños, muchos de ellos en situaciones de extrema vulnerabilidad. No podemos permitir que el lenguaje político nos haga olvidar la realidad humana que hay detrás de cada migrante. Mostramos nuestro rechazo absoluto a los centros de retorno. Es una vergüenza que el Comité de Ministros los haya incluido en esta declaración política de Chisinau. Son una mancha para la conciencia europea y un fracaso de nuestros compromisos con los derechos humanos. Esta Asamblea Parlamentaria tiene la obligación de promover todas las medidas de protección necesarias para garantizar el derecho de asilo, el principio de no devolución y la dignidad de los migrantes. Si olvidamos que detrás de cada migrante hay una historia, una vida, un miedo y una esperanza, abandonamos los valores mismos sobre los que se fundó el Consejo de Europa. Y cuando a los migrantes les negamos su humanidad, traicionamos nuestra propia humanidad y con ello nos negamos a nosotros mismos como personas. Gracias.
Thank you. Next one is Mrs. Danuta Jalowiecka from Poland. She doesn't seem to be here. Then we proceed to Dame Karen Bradley from United Kingdom.
Is that working? Great. Thank you very much for calling me, Madam President. Immigration issues affect all countries across Europe, and combined efforts are utterly vital. The public demand action, and those that would wish to dismantle and fundamentally alter our way of life use the issue of immigration to demonise human beings to further their own ambitions. So it is essential that we come together to take action, to understand why people are moving in the first place, and to try and deal with the causes at source. So others in this debate will speak about the measures in the Chisinau Declaration, so I won't repeat those comments, although I do welcome the joint leadership that has been shown. But I want to focus, though, on the risks to the most vulnerable, those that are coerced and abused, victims of human trafficking, modern slaves. Modern slavery is not an immigration crime. It is too often confused as an immigration crime, but it is a financial crime. It is one human being using another human being for financial profit. Your immigration status might be a vulnerability, but it is not a crime of immigration. When we talk about immigration crimes, what we mean is people smuggling. And I want to focus on the fact that in Article 4 of the Council of Europe Convention, human trafficking is defined as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harbouring or receipt of persons. It does not have to involve movement. It is a crime about the abuse of one human being by another for financial profit. But we seem to think that policy responses to this crime should be the same as the responses to people smuggling. And I would just point out that if somebody has their drink spiked and they are drugged through a spiking of a drink, we don't have the same policy response to them as we do to someone who has gone out and actively bought an illegal substance to take it. So don't confuse the two crimes. There is no evidence that human trafficking protections are being used as immigration loopholes, and we must not create more victims of human trafficking in the cause of trying to stop people smuggling.
Thank you. Next one is Roberto Speranza from Italy.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in Italian. Ho deciso di intervenire in questo dibattito perché penso che non possiamo tornare indietro. Penso che ci siano voluti secoli di battaglie politiche per affermare un'idea di eguaglianza dei diritti e di Stato di diritti. Noi siamo tutti uguali e non dobbiamo dimenticarlo mai. Le ultime decisioni e le ultime dichiarazioni io credo che siano sbagliate perché dettate dalla paura, e la paura non consente di governare i processi e la paura rischia di farci tornare indietro. Io penso che questo non sia accettabile e non lo è per almeno due ragioni fondamentali. La prima, umana, una ragione di fondo. I migranti non sono numeri, non sono percentuali. I migranti sono donne, bambini, uomini e dobbiamo avere il coraggio, la forza di riconoscere sempre la loro dignità. E queste parole con grande intelligenza e con grande potenza le pronuncia continuamente il nostro Papa Leone e il suo predecessore, Papa Francesco, con grandissima forza. E poi la seconda, l'Europa ha un grande problema demografico. Dai banchi della destra si inseguono parole senza senso, invasione, remigrazione. Sono parole senza senso e contro la realtà e la verità. Di queste persone abbiamo bisogno per reggere dentro un contesto sociale e demografico che in Europa è assolutamente complesso. E allora io chiudo, Presidente, dicendo grazie al lavoro che Sandra Zampa sta portando avanti e ricordando a tutti qual è il ruolo del Consiglio d'Europa. Questo luogo è un tempio dei diritti e di questi diritti dobbiamo essere orgogliosi e dobbiamo batterci ogni giorno per difenderli con tutte le energie di cui disponiamo. Grazie. Grazie.
I next call Lisa Yasko from Ukraine. Lisa.
Dear colleagues, Let me start by saying thank you on behalf of millions of Ukrainian people. At least 8 million, according to different numbers, had to leave Ukraine to find a temporary protection outside of Ukraine. Most of these people don't have houses, don't they have homes anymore in Ukraine. And we are very grateful to all of you who opened your doors, your hearts, your schools, to give that shelter that really matters. In this hall, when I listen to all of you here on the right and on the left, I often wonder why there is a discussion whether we need migrants or we don't need migrants. But we're not facing that migration is happening in the last 10 years because of so many crises around the world connected to the climate change and democracy problems or authoritarian regimes or terrorism or wars. These people are forced to leave, not because they want, but because they are forced to leave. Why we are not discussing here what kind of educational inclusion policies we have in our countries, in the EU, how can we make that integration process better? Yes, there is evidence that economically migrants really help economies. But yes, if there is so much diversity, we have to work more on inclusion. So we have to be discussing what tools can we use, what soft power tools can we use, what about the language? An option just to have migrants and pay all the money to them is not an option. We should be sure that we have a number of years when these people have to integrate into the society, but it would cost so much less for us if we actually invest in protecting democracies around the globe and not to allow authoritarian regimes to flourish. That would be a very, very good solution. Thank you.
The next one is José María Sánchez García from Spain.
Gracias, señora Presidente. En 1848, en el Manifiesto Comunista, Marx y Engels escribieron: los proletarios no tienen patria. Si esta fuese la razón ideológica actual de la izquierda y del progresismo para defender la inmigración sin límite legal alguno, yo podría comprenderlo. Pero por alguna razón me parece que no es así. Y si lo es, la izquierda y ese progresismo woke insisten en ocultarlo. No lo sé. Si no profesan esta idea o simplemente la ocultan, me da igual. Lo cierto es que el derecho internacional público y el derecho europeo, así como el derecho de los estados nacionales, todos los estados nacionales, todos y cada uno de los estados miembros del Consejo de Europa, no reconocen un derecho de inmigración o de emigración ilimitado. No es así. Se han escuchado esta mañana varios errores. Por ejemplo, he escuchado decir que el principio del non-refoulement es universal para todo movimiento migratorio. Falso, no es así y no lo va a ser, porque la tendencia no es a incrementar los efectos de ese principio, sino a restringirlo, como en general hay una tendencia a la corrección de esta inmigración sin límites, como ponen de manifiesto los recientes casos de Italia o Alemania. En síntesis, esta inmigración que Europa occidental conoce obedece esencialmente, no en su totalidad, pero una gran mayoría, de consecuencias de la descolonización, porque los territorios de viejos imperios coloniales no han logrado desarrollarse económicamente como esperaban, con alguna excepción muy importante, como el caso de la...
The next on the list is Agnes Sirka-Brammer from Austria.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Wir diskutieren hier über einen Bericht, der ist sehr kurz und eigentlich stehen da drinnen nur Selbstverständlichkeiten, nämlich dass Migrantinnen und Flüchtlinge genau diese medizinische Betreuung kriegen sollen, die sie brauchen. Nicht mehr und nicht weniger. Aber genauso wie in der gesamten Debatte dient dieser Bericht als ein Katalysator für ganz viele andere Probleme, die alle sich an diesem Thema Migration kristallisieren. Und das ist ein großes Problem unserer Gesellschaft. Und das ist auch ein Problem, das mittlerweile auch hier angekommen ist. Natürlich ist es schwierig, wenn ein Gesundheitssystem in einem Staat aus den letzten Löchern pfeift, wenn ein Bildungssystem nicht so gestaltet ist, dass es allen die gleichen Chancen bietet. Ja, dann ist es ein Problem, wenn neue Menschen dazukommen und die darin aufgenommen werden müssen. Das liegt aber nicht an den Menschen, das liegt an den Systemen, die wir jahrelang, jahrzehntelang nicht auf einen Stand gebracht haben, sodass sie mit den Anforderungen der modernen Zeit mithalten können. Da können aber nicht diejenigen etwas dafür, die von außen dazukommen, sondern diejenigen, die jahrelang und jahrzehntelang daran nichts geändert haben. Das ist eigentlich in allen Bereichen das Problem, und die Lösung wird immer darin gesehen, dass man sagt, es dürfen keine neuen Menschen kommen, und es werden enorme Ressourcen und enorme Energien und viele, viele Stunden an Debatten darin verwendet, dass man sagt, man muss mit dem Problem der Migration zurande kommen, anstatt die eigentlichen Probleme anzugehen und die zu lösen. Denn das wäre eigentlich unser aller Aufgabe. Aber tatsächlich ist es so, dass all diese Dinge, die wir hier diskutieren, einen gemeinsamen Grund haben und eine gemeinsame Basis haben müssen. Und das ist das Fundament, auf dem wir alle aufbauen. Menschenrechte gelten für alle Menschen gleich, oder niemand kann sich mehr darauf verlassen. Und das müssen wir gerade in dieser Debatte am meisten beherzigen. Vielen Dank.
The next on my speaking list is Mr. Vasilios Nikolaos Ypsilantis from Greece.
Merci Madame la Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs les collègues. L'Europe cherche à concilier la gestion des migrations avec ses valeurs et avec des moyens efficaces. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de chiffres ou de procédures de retire. Il s'agit aussi de la sécurité des citoyens, de la cohésion sociale et du respect des droits de l'homme. Aucun État ne peut y faire face seul. La Grèce, en tant que frontière extérieure, assume une responsabilité particulière en Méditerranée orientale. C'est pourquoi les solutions doivent tenir compte de la réalité des États en première ligne. Nous devons trouver un équilibre entre une gestion efficace des migrations irrégulières et le plein respect de nos droits et de nos valeurs. Parallèlement, les États doivent disposer d'outils pour lutter contre les réseaux de passeurs, les traversées illégales et les pressions hybrides qui exploitent des êtres humains. Comme rappelait M. Alain Berset, notre intention n'est pas d'affaiblir la Convention, mais de la maintenir forte et pertinente, trouver un juste équilibre entre liberté et sécurité, justice et responsabilité. Nous avons besoin de décisions communes, permettre de l'arrivée légale et digne des personnes migrantes, d'un renforcement des programmes de réinstallation et d'investissement en matière d'intégration, ainsi que des mesures visant à soutenir les pays d'accueil, la protection des réfugiés et les principes de non-refoulement demeurent inaliénables. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much, and Sam Rushworth from the United Kingdom is next.
Thank you. I wanted to address some comments in response to what we heard from our colleague from Belgium, but I see he's no longer here. But I was shocked by the way that he demonised migrants in a way that I've not heard in this continent for 80 years. I thought we defeated that ideology. My country, it has a warm tradition of welcoming migrants. They serve in our armed forces. They treat us in our National Health Service. They build our buildings. They set up shops. My own wife is a migrant to our country. She works as a midwife. I'm also proud of the role that we've played in hosting Ukrainians. We had a Ukrainian mother and daughter live with my family for over a year, and they enrich our community. But from the area that I represent in Bishop Auckland in the northeast of England to the capitals of our continent, we need to be honest. People are asking for migration to be managed effectively and fairly. They want governments to control borders and to take action against the criminal gangs who profit from human misery. It's vital that we do so, because we also know that people are now weaponising a minority of controversial cases from this place in order to weaken and dismantle the rules-based international order that Europe helped to build after the Second World War. And that would be a profound mistake. If we want to safeguard the Convention, we have to listen carefully to those we represent. Lengthy appeals, asylum backlogs, and increasingly sophisticated criminal smuggling networks place pressure on public services and taxpayers, while undermining confidence in migration systems. And that's why I welcome the balanced approach taken by the Chisinau Declaration and pay tribute to the constructive role played by the Government of the United Kingdom and our European partners in advancing it, and particularly welcome the emphasis on tackling human trafficking networks and migrant smuggling. Thank you.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you. And Bernardo Pessahan from Portugal is next.
Madam President, dear colleagues, the migration crisis facing Europe is the result of wrong political choices, years of permissiveness, weak borders, and an ideological vision that has confused humanity with absence of control. In Portugal, the latest figures show that there have never been so many foreign nationals living in our countries. Almost 1.6 million, nearly 15% of the population. This did not happen by chance. It happened because for years, in Portugal and in other European countries, socialist governments and parties of the left opened the doors without criteria and without control. They did so without any serious concern for integration capacity, housing, public service, wages, security, or the cultural cohesion of our communities. This open-door policy created a real pull factor. When a state sends the world the message that it is in us to enter first and be regularized later, when it replaces borders with permissiveness, when it confuses humanity with irresponsibility, the result is inevitable. Pressure on cities, on schools, on hospitals, on housing, and on national workers. No country has the duty to accept everyone. No state is obliged to sacrifice its identity, its security, and its social sustainability in the name of a multicultural utopia that has failed. Europe needs borders. Europe needs rules. Europe needs to expel those who are here illegally, those who commit crimes, and those who reject our Judeo-Christian values. But Europe also needs a courageous birth policy. The answer to Europe's demographic crisis cannot be the dissolution of Europe. It must be Europe's renewal.
Thank you very much. And now I call on Patricia Stevenson from Ireland.
Working now. Thank you. Colleagues, the political declaration signed in December last year was disturbing. It was disturbing that 27 Council of Europe member states chose to politicise the work of the court. And I want to get this clear. I firmly believe that a political engagement with the ECHR is critical. States are central to the ECHR. It is states that implement the convention. It is states that execute the judgments. And it's states that resource the system. Previous high-level summits focused on effectiveness and efficiency. Really positive contributions. However, the declaration in December and the subsequent Chisinau process went far beyond that. It proposed a retreat from the very concept of universal human rights, that we should alter frameworks so that they don't apply to all people and in all cases. It represented, quite frankly, an insidious narrative that somehow human rights frameworks are impinging on states' ability to implement domestic legislation on international protection policy. And I find it absolutely astonishing.
I find it astonishing that any Council of Europe country would seek to increase the thresholds on what constitutes torture or inhumane and degrading treatment. Article 3 is an absolute right. You can't proportionately torture someone. Instead of turning towards the human rights systems in times of crisis and safeguarding the values of human dignity, we have seen some Council of Europe countries, including Ireland, I might add, attempt to politicise the ECHR and introduce a debate on the very concept of universality of human rights. And I believe that the human rights that we have are the minimum standard that should be afforded to every human being in the world, regardless of what country they are born into. In the words of Nobel Peace Prize winner John Hume, difference is the essence of humanity, and difference is an accident of birth. So, colleagues, do we think that everyone is born equal? Or is there a hierarchy of equality based on where we're born? Do some people deserve more rights than others? Or are we actually committed to the concept of universal fundamental rights? Any future attempts to alter Article 3 will not only reduce the rights to be protected from torture for asylum seekers and for migrants, but it will reduce the rights for every single one of us, for every single citizen that falls under the ECHR. And what we're seeing right now is an erosion of international law right before our very eyes, and it is, quite frankly, terrifying.
The next on the list of speakers is Dimitrios Mantsos from Greece.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel that every time that we engage in this discussion here, we have to get back to basics. Migration is not a problem, it is a phenomenon inherent to human nature. And it is by the way that we choose to manage to address this phenomenon that we will be judged in the end as European citizens. And the worst possible response is dishonesty, ideological dogmatism, prejudice, xenophobia, and racism. We will not defend the voices of hatred by validating their narrative. We will not make the monster less frightening by beginning to look like it. The answer lies in public policies that guarantee fundamental rights for all without discrimination, policies that promote integration, recognize regular migration routes, combat the criminal smuggling networks. The protection of borders must always go hand in hand with the protection of human life and human dignity. This must be a common European commitment. We need solidarity between European countries in practice regarding asylum applications, relocation mechanisms, integration policies. The EU Pact on Migration and Asylum, a very difficult result of a difficult compromise, must be assessed on the basis of its implementation. It should not be undermined by extreme voices that are already seeking to revise it, nor can we afford to shift the entire burden of responsibility onto frontline states, threatening to turn them to EU-funded prisons. Migration is not a national issue, after all. It is a common question for all of us in Europe, and ultimately, the whole question depends on the very values upon which our united Europe was built: humanism, human rights, and genuine solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final speaker on this point now is Mr. Ricardo Carvalho from Portugal.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear colleagues. Migration is one of the defining challenges facing Europe today. It requires realism, responsibility, and humanity. Europe has a duty to protect those genuinely fleeing war and persecution, but it also a duty to guarantee secure borders, uphold the rule of law, and preserve social cohesion. Our position is simple. Europe must distinguish between legal migration and illegal migration. We must remain open to those who contribute to our societies and economies through legal channels, while firmly combating illegal entry and the criminal networks that profit from human suffering. The fight against human trafficking must be intensified. At the same time, we need more effective returns mechanism and stronger partnerships with countries of origin and transit. A return policy that is not enforced undermines the credibility of the entire migration system. Migration policies must also reflect each country's capacity to integrate newcomers. Successful integration requires access to employment, language learning, education, and respect for the fundamental values of our democracy societies. Portugal supports this balanced approach. The Portuguese government has taken important steps to restore migration management, strengthen border controls, improve administrative procedures, and promote effective integration while fully respecting human dignity and international obligations. Europe must reject simplistic solutions. Neither under-controlled migration nor islamism offer answers. What our citizens expect is a policy that is firm against illegality, fair to those who respect the rules, and faithful to our European values. Secure borders, legal migration, effective immigration, integration, and human dignity. This is the balanced European approach we should defend. Thank you very much.
I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speaking list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication on the official report. Speeches must not exceed 400 words. I remind colleagues that the typewritten text to be submitted electronically, if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. And I now call Mrs. Sandra Samper to reply. You have 3 minutes, Sandra.
Grazie Presidente, ringrazio tutti i colleghi che sono intervenuti con argomenti seri che andranno discussi e approfonditi. Respingo invece davvero, senza assolutamente incertezza, ogni argomento che è stato portato in questa Aula e che ha confermato che per alcune forze politiche i migranti sono solo il bersaglio di odio e di razzismo e che davvero sta diventando l'oggetto di un doping elettorale che si costruisce seminando la paura. Io ricordo a tutti che ogni argomento va suffragato con dati che dimostrino quello che si dice. Ciò che ho sentito, una parte di ciò che ho sentito, per fortuna la parte minore, non risponde a questo criterio. Voglio concludere con le parole, permettetemi di citarlo, che a Las Palmas sono state pronunciate da Papa Leone. Voglio concludere con questo perché ho parlato di anima, di un'anima europea, e io ricordo a molti che spesso ci sono forze politiche che hanno fondato anche su alcuni valori ispirati anche al cristianesimo o certamente a principi, forti valori religiosi, che stanno probabilmente dimenticandoseli, e tradire la propria anima significa avviare un percorso che porta alla distruzione di se stessi. A Las Palmas il Papa ci ha ricordato che ogni vita che arriva ci chiede che cosa resta della nostra umanità. Prima o poi, ha detto, si saprà se questa umanità abbiamo saputo custodirla o se abbiamo lasciato che l'indifferenza parlasse per noi. Ecco, io sono tra coloro che pensano che non solo non si può lasciare come risposta all'indifferenza, tanto meno si può rispondere semplicemente con l'odio perché serve a lucrare politicamente. Io credo, come ho detto, che la migrazione richieda certamente risposte molto serie, ma queste risposte serie vanno assunte studiandola, conoscendola e gestendola, non semplicemente strumentalizzandola come invece avviene. Un dato tra gli altri che non è stato qui richiamato è che il 65% del totale dei rifugiati sono accolti in paesi confinanti e non sono certamente in Europa. E il 23% di questo numero è in questo momento ospitato nei paesi più poveri del mondo. Questi sono numeri che parlano da soli e questo ci dice che l'Europa ha non solo un dovere, ma anche, come è stato ricordato, interesse ad avere una migrazione intelligente, ben gestita, guidata. Chi non è capace di farlo non è degno di fare politica.
The debate is closed. I remind you that at the end of a current affairs debate, the Assembly is not asked to decide upon a text, but the matter may be referred by the Bureau to the responsible committee for report. I interrupt now the sitting for 1 minute to make changes in seating orders, and the sitting will start again with the debate access of migrants and refugees to healthcare in 1 minute. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, we resume our meeting, and the next item of business this morning is the debate on the report titled Access of Migrants and Refugees to the Healthcare, document 16412 in your files, presented by Ms. Pelin-Ilic on behalf of the Committee on Migration, International Protection and Economic Cooperation. And we will then hear from Ms. Yulia Ovchinnikova, who will present an opinion on behalf of Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development, document I've indicated. Colleagues, in order to finish by 12:15, I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 11:55 a.m. to allow time for the reply and the vote to be casted. We will be with Ms. Ilic, rapporteur, and dear Ms. Ilic, you have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes in the end to reply at the debate. Thank you, Ms. Ilic. The floor is yours.
Dear Ms. Chairperson, dear colleagues, migration is not a crisis. The crisis is the failure to manage it together. These are the words of Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General and former member of our Assembly. International protection is enshrined in international law. Everyone's right to life shall be protected by law, states Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights. That right is complemented by Article 11 of the European Social Charter, the right to protection of health for every human being on our territories. People seeking international protection are people in distress, fleeing war, violence, persecution, and human rights abuses. They risk their lives crossing dangerous lands, oceans, and seas, often in the hands of criminal smuggling networks. They are vulnerable, especially women and children, who are disproportionately exposed to trafficking, sexual and gender-based violence and exploitation. So, colleagues, why we are providing healthcare to migrants and refugees? Because this is first and foremost a human rights obligation, and beyond that, a moral obligation in the name of humanity. The measures proposed in the draft resolution are essential to protecting vulnerable lives and strengthening public health across our continent. By adopting these documents, we will reaffirm our commitment to human dignity, international law, and Council of Europe standards, including the European Social Charter and the United Nations 2030 Agenda's Sustainable Development Goals on universal healthcare access. Ensuring access to healthcare for people in need of international protection is not new. Many of our member states already have constitutional and legislative provisions on access to healthcare, regardless of the profiles, nationalities, or origins of those concerned. With this proposed resolution, I would like the Assembly to invite member and observer states to avoid externalized migration and asylum policies, including return hubs which curtail healthcare access or shift protection burdens onto areas lacking the necessary infrastructure and safeguards. Strengthen domestic laws to integrate migrants into national health insurance schemes. Ensure mental health care through psychological and psychiatric support. Guarantee migrants access to information on their rights. The resolution also invites health authorities to provide free health care from arrival, including emergencies, vaccinations, medicines, provide comprehensive medical examinations to identify vulnerabilities, instruct professionals to check for injuries, strengthen staff capacity by training general practitioners, nurses, and psychosocial teams in specific needs. Dear colleagues, from an economic perspective, People in need of international protection often delay seeking care because of fear, mistrust, cost of treatment, or administrative hurdles, and instead resort to costly emergency departments. Primary and preventive care would address needs more comprehensively, manage chronic conditions, and reduce avoidable hospitalizations. Inclusive policies, including insurance coverage and integrated health units, lower costs while improving mental health outcomes. Effective and swift access to healthcare is essential not only for the people concerned, but also for the well-being of host societies as a whole. The text calls furthermore for action by leveraging of Europe Development Bank funding to improve infrastructure, equipment, and staffing where possible. Finally, we parliamentarians must promote Council of Europe standards at national and European levels, aligning laws and practices with these recommendations. In conclusion, dear colleagues, I know as a specialist that access to healthcare services is difficult for our populations overall. That is why we as decision makers must take a holistic approach to access to healthcare for all individuals under our jurisdiction. This is also about effective migration management as a whole. These steps safeguard migrants' health while protecting our societies from disease, outbreaks, and humanitarian crises. These proposals chart a path towards equitable, cost-effective systems that benefit people in need of international protection and host societies alike. They place great value on human fraternity without compromising public health imperatives. For these reasons, I warmly invite you to adopt this essential resolution, including with the amendments proposed by Social Affairs Committee, which strengthen the text. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Silik. Now I call Ms. Ovchinnikova for the opinion from the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. Ms. Sula, you have 3 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I would like to warmly thank our rapporteur for this timely and important report. Today, more than 281 million people live outside their country of origin. And the Council of Europe region hosts the largest share of international migrants worldwide. Behind these numbers are human beings who often arrive after experience conflict, persecution, poverty, or displacement, and who face significant barriers in accessing healthcare. Access to healthcare is not a matter of charity. It's a matter of fundamental rights, human dignity, and the rule of law. The European Social Charter is clear. Article 11 guarantees the right to protection of health. Article 13 guarantees the right to social and medical assistance. This obligation applies to everyone, including migrants and refugees, especially those in vulnerable situations. Often migrants face language barriers, administrative obstacles, discrimination, and exclusion from essential services. We must reaffirm a simple principle: health cannot depend on nationality, migration status, or legal category. The report also rightly raises concern about the outsourcing of the migrants' management and creation of a returns hub. Wherever people are located, human rights standards and access to health care must fully be respected. Human dignity cannot be outsourced. At the same time, this is not only humanitarian issues. It's also a matter of sound public policy. Evidence from several European countries demonstrates that early access to primary health care and medical screening reduces long-term costs, prevents health emergency, and strengthens public health resilience. I would like also to highlight several practical measures that deserve our support: ensuring free interpretation services in health care settings, improving access to essential medicines, strengthening safeguards for medical confidently, and developing digital health records that allow countries to care across borders. Finally, we must address shortages to healthcare professionals. Dear colleagues, The health of migrants and refugees means protecting the health of our society as a whole. A rights-based approach grounded in a human dignity, non-discrimination, equality, solidarity, and this is not legally required, it's socially responsible and morally necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ovchinnikova. And now I'd like to remind the Assembly that the speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for the speeches on behalf of the spokesperson of political groups and 2 minutes dedicated to the members' speeches. Colleagues, now I call the first on the floor on behalf of Socialist Group, Ms. Anne Lambelin. Ms. Anne, the floor is yours, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. En 2026, sommes-nous vraiment encore obligés de rappeler que chaque être humain possède des droits fondamentaux? Malheureusement, oui. Et ça devrait toutes et tous nous inquiéter. Car la dignité humaine ne devrait jamais être un sujet de débat. Le droit à la santé ne devrait jamais être remis en cause. Ce sont les fondements mêmes de notre Assemblée et de nos démocraties. Il y a quelques jours au Parlement européen, les élus d'extrême droite se sont levés pour applaudir un vote sur le retour des migrants. Cette scène, elle m'a glacé le sang. Et j'entends encore aujourd'hui l'extrême droite s'exprimer et tenir des propos racistes et xénophobes. Ça me donne tout simplement la nausée. Car de qui parle-t-on aujourd'hui? On ne parle pas de statistiques, on ne parle pas de procédures administratives ou de flux migratoires. On parle d'êtres humains, d'hommes, de femmes, d'enfants qui arrivent sur notre territoire avec leurs blessures, leurs traumatismes et l'espoir de trouver enfin un peu de sécurité. Et quand un être humain arrive sur un nouveau territoire, il ne perd ni sa dignité, ni son humanité, ni ses droits fondamentaux. Parmi ces droits, celui qui est au cœur de nos débats aujourd'hui, le droit à la santé, le droit d'être soigné quand on est malade, le droit d'accéder à un accompagnement psychologique quand on a été marqué par la guerre ou l'exil, le droit pour une femme enceinte d'être suivie, d'être protégée, le droit pour un enfant d'être soigné, tout simplement. Car, sincèrement, qui pourrait accepter qu'un enfant soit privé de soins? Alors, chers collègues, un droit fondamental qui ne s'applique qu'à certains ne devient qu'un privilège. Et la santé ne doit jamais devenir un privilège réservé à celles et ceux qui disposent du bon statut administratif. La santé, c'est un droit humain universel. Et la logique, elle se reflète dans des choix budgétaires. 10 ans, le budget de Frontex est passé de 142 millions à plus d'1,1 milliard d'euros par an. Les moyens, chers collègues, les moyens, ils existent. La véritable question, c'est de savoir ce que nous choisissons d'en faire. Choisissons-nous d'investir dans les murs ou dans les vies, dans les peurs ou dans la dignité? Alors, chers collègues, voulons-nous être une Europe qui détourne le regard ou une Europe qui tend la main, une Europe qui exclut ou une Europe qui protège? Pour notre groupe, ce choix, il est fait. Nous choisissons la dignité, nous choisissons l'humanité, nous choisissons une Europe qui soigne plutôt qu'une Europe qui exclut, nous choisissons une Europe qui protège plutôt qu'une Europe qui rejette, une Europe qui affirme que le droit à la santé, il appartient à chaque être humain, sans exception, simplement et tout simplement parce qu'il est humain. Je vous remercie.
Merci bien encore. The next on my list, representing EPP, is Mr. Yuri Kamelchuk. Yuri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, this report speaks about two different situations that cannot be confused, the situation of migrants and situation of refugees. Also, when it speaks about the migrants, don't make any distinctions of those migrants who arrived in a legal way or in an illegal way. The report believes that there are unlimited number of resources in the Western social services that can be shared with all of those who want to come to Europe by any kind of means. The report is also a direct challenge about what the European Parliament has voted in the past weeks. That consideration makes impossible to the EPP to support it. But all through, there are really good ideas when the report affords the situation of the refugees. Access of refugees to healthcare is not a matter of our goodwill or compromise. It is an imperative and international law and a core element of security for the whole of Europe. In the case of the refugees, the report clearly proves that existing administrative and legal barriers destroy human lives and pose a direct threat to the public health or host countries. Today, this challenge has a concrete, painful face. These are millions of people, including Ukrainians, predominantly women and children, fleeing a full-scale war. They arrive exhausted with deep psychological trauma, chronic illness, and an acute need for rehabilitation. Providing them with a systematic treatment is a matter of survival. Initiatives such as the Council of Europe Development Bank HEAL project, which funds mental rehabilitation and support for internally displaced persons, prove that effective financial solutions exist, but they must be scaled up. We must put an end to the shameful practice where, out of fear, bureaucracy, or lack of information, refugees are forced to delay treatment until they end up in emergency care. This is not only inhumane, it is economically absurd. Emergency department care costs the budget of European countries significantly more than timely primary prevention and the integration of people into national health insurance schemes. The member states of the Council of Europe should take some steps. First, strict control to the borders as a way to guarantee a social system where the legal immigration and refugees could have all the rights guaranteed. Second, guarantee access to basic health care, emergency services, medicines, and vaccination from the very first minute for a person arrival to refugees and legal immigrants. And third, try to eliminate the language barrier using AI and new tools that could make easier the work to the doctors. The time for half measures is over. We need clear legislative changes, financial accountability, and decisiveness in our actions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Yuri. The next in the debate is Ms. Malte Larsen, representing ECPA Group. Mr. Larsen, the floor is yours.
Me? Great. Dear colleagues, millions of immigrants are entering Europe from Africa and from the Middle East, and we are seeing the consequences every single day. Just yesterday, a 17-year-old boy in France, this boy was killed by a group of migrant boys who attacked and ambushed him and brutally beat him to death in France. They laughed at him while he was choking on his own blood. Only 2 weeks ago, this African migrant also attacked an innocent man in the streets of Belfast and tried to cut his head off 2 weeks ago. And 1 month ago, this happened. We all know this. We all saw the video of Henry Nowak, who was killed by a migrant as well. This, dear colleagues, is the brutal consequences of mass migration to Europe. We have innocent people all over Europe getting attacked and killed on our streets. We have young girls who are getting attacked and getting abused and raped by grooming gangs from the Middle East. And we have many areas all over Europe. Well, you can shout at me all you like, but the boys who've been killed cannot hear your shouting. All over Europe, we are becoming minorities increasingly in different societies. That is the brutal reality of mass immigration. And here we are in the Council of Europe speaking about whether we should give more welfare to immigrants. We're not talking about solving the problems. We're not talking about making our streets safe again. We're not talking about sending the people home who should have never come to Europe. We're talking about making Europe an even stronger magnet for mass immigration. Dear colleagues, this is outrageous. We do not need more mass immigration coming to Europe. We do not need to have more Islamists in our countries who are wreaking havoc. And we do not need to send more welfare paid by European taxpayers to immigrants. We need to have a change. And we all know this. We all know that this is not just about welfare. You even write in this report that you are against the return hubs. This is clearly about accelerating the mass migration and Islamization of Europe. And this is not what we need. We need to send the people home who should have never come into Europe in the first place. It is very clear that this report is not just about welfare. It is about mass migration, which many of you, I see, support quite heavily. But given that this is a fact, this is a matter of instrumentalizing migration to wreak havoc in Europe, we can of course not support this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, I have noticed that Ms. Lamberlin Anne have asked to take the floor to ask a question to another member on behalf of the group, Socialist Group, in accordance with the Article 37.4 of the Rules of Procedure. Ms. Lamberlin, I remind you that you must ask a question, but rather not make a speech. And the question must be addressed to a member who does not belong to your political group, obviously. I must directly relate to the speech made by that member and to the subject of the debate. You will have 30 seconds to ask it. The floor is yours. Excuse me, Ms. Lamberlin, which member would you like to ask a question? Please indicate. Please go ahead.
Madame la Présidente, alors quand je disais que j'entendais des propos abjects qui me donnaient la nausée, c'était exactement ces propos-là. Combien de personnes ont été tuées par l'extrême droite dans l'histoire? Combien de personnes ont été victimes par vous, vos actions, les actions de l'extrême droite, la xénophobie, le racisme? Répondez à ma question. C'est une question réelle. Quand on commence avec des statistiques, vous devez répondre.
Colleagues, applause are very much welcomed. You know that we are in the Council of Europe premises and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Please don't send bad negative examples by shouting at each other. You can all speak, and I will be very strict on that. Now, Mr. Larsen, you've been addressed a question. You have 30 seconds to reply. You have 30 seconds, not 1 minute, not half an hour minute. 30 seconds, Mr. Larsen.
Thank you very much. Well, last time I checked, the young boys who were getting killed in our streets and the women who were getting raped, they weren't raped by and killed by right-wing people. They were killed or raped by immigrants coming from Africa and the Middle East. And we're taking this serious. We actually care about the security of our citizens. I know you don't, but I do.
Thank you for committing to the procedure. Colleagues, I now call the next speaker on our debate, and this is Ms. Larissa Belazir, representing ALDE Group. Ms. Belazir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank Rapporteur Ms. Pelin Hillik for the important and deeply human-centered report. Yes, very challenging, but very important, because we are all humans, and we don't have to choose which race we are, which color of skin we are. We all humans, and we are equal. Access to healthcare is fundamental right. We talked about this established international law and also affirmed by the Assembly, but yet it remains systematically denied, and actually millions of people crossing borders are denied access and denied access to health. Migrants arrive in state of extreme physical exhaustion. They are all facing dramas and conditions that impair not only the individuals, but their children and their communities, and ultimately the society that receives them. When migrants are excluded from national health care, costs rise and outcome worsen. It is not compassion failing, it's also a policy failing. For Ukraine, this report is not abstract. Russia's war of aggression has created one of the largest displacement crises in modern European history. And I want to say thank you. The European Union and the Council of Europe countries, member states, rose to this challenge, and they coped. Their healthcare is coped. Putin hoped that it will be collapsing, but he received 8 million people, providing, if you take example of Germany, Poland, they provided the healthcare to 1 million Ukrainians. At once, they came and they received this insurance. And they received decent attitude, so Europe is able to do so. Of course, there are some reviews what remained unfinished, and even when we are talking about Poland, they have adopted recently in March the law that denied access to health, I mean insurance, to the most vulnerable, to the Ukrainian pensioners and to the people with disabilities. And of course, we have here the Polish delegation. We are talking with them. They know this problem, and they're saying they are still trying to solve this problem with the government, but still, as of now, the law was adopted in March, it remains not solved. So when we speak of human dignity, we cannot make exceptions based on employment status. We are all human beings, and a pensioner or disabled who fled bombardment deserves the same protection as working adult. That is not a political statement, it's a moral one. And speaking on behalf of the ALDE group, we are liberals because we believe in the dignity of every person, regardless of where they were born or how they arrived. Healthcare is a precondition for human dignity. This report calls for universal healthcare framework, free emergency care from the first day of arrival, and investment in mental health support in reception centers. There are minimal standards for civilized societies that we have to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Colleagues, the next on my list on behalf of UL Group is Mr. Emmanuel Fernandez. The floor is yours, Emmanuel.
Merci Madame la Présidente. On voit clairement ce matin pourquoi la déclaration politique de Chisinau issue de notre institution il y a quelques semaines est une honte puisqu'elle a été inspirée par ces gens-là aux obsessions racistes, xénophobes et qui tiennent aujourd'hui des propos, encore une fois, absolument inacceptables. Je voudrais en tout cas remercier la rapporteure pour la qualité de son travail. Son texte défend un principe absolument fondamental, celui de l'accès aux soins pour toutes et tous, sans discrimination, sans distinction. Quelle que soit notre origine, notre situation administrative ou notre parcours de vie, le soin est un droit. Ce n'est ni un privilège ni une faveur. Prendre soin de l'autre est même l'un des gestes fondateurs de notre humanité. Une société se juge à la manière dont elle protège les plus vulnérables et garantit à chacun l'accès à la dignité. On pourrait penser que cette évidence est largement partagée, mais on l'a vu, malheureusement, c'est loin d'être le cas. En France, nous disposons d'un dispositif appelé Aide médicale de l'État, l'AME, qui permet aux personnes étrangères en situation irrégulière d'accéder aux soins. C'est un outil de protection. Il protège les personnes concernées, mais il protège aussi l'ensemble de la société. Et pourtant, ce dispositif est régulièrement attaqué. Ces attaques ne viennent pas seulement de l'extrême droite, dégoulinante de ses obsessions racistes et xénophobes, qui est tout simplement pour la suppression pure et simple de cette aide médicale de l'État. Car de son côté, la droite dite républicaine souhaite y restreindre très fortement l'accès, et même le centre, incarné notamment par l'ancien Premier ministre Gabriel Attal, a porté des propositions s'attaquant à ce droit. En Espagne, en 2012, le gouvernement conservateur de Mariano Rajoy avait drastiquement limité l'accès aux soins pour les personnes sans papier pour des questions d'économie budgétaire et de lutte contre un prétendu tourisme sanitaire, pour finalement que Pedro Sánchez, à la tête d'un gouvernement de gauche, rétablisse le dispositif en 2018. Ce retour en arrière a été motivé non seulement par des arguments humanitaires, mais aussi par des considérations de santé publique, car plusieurs analyses ont démontré que la restriction de 2012 avait favorisé le report des patients vers les urgences et n'avait pas produit les économies espérées. En Grèce, en 2019, la droite, à peine arrivée au pouvoir, a exclu les demandeurs d'asile et les sans-papiers des dispositifs d'accès aux soins qui avaient été mis en place par Syriza entre 2015 et 2019. À ce jour, c'est une véritable catastrophe. Seuls ceux qui ont les moyens de se soigner peuvent le faire. Oui, l'accès universel aux soins est indispensable. Il permet de garantir l'accès à la santé des personnes les plus précaires. Il sauve des vies, prévient l'aggravation de maladies et favorise un suivi médical indispensable. Il relève aussi du bon sens en matière de santé publique, car les maladies infectieuses, les épidémies et les virus ne reconnaissent ni les frontières, ni les passeports, ni les titres de séjour. Alors face à ces réalités, notre responsabilité est d'apporter davantage de protection. Pour toutes ces raisons, mon groupe de la gauche unitaire européenne votera évidemment avec conviction en faveur de ce rapport. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Merci encore. Colleagues, we move to the speakers list, the general one, and I call now Ms. Danuta Jazlowiecka. Danuta, the floor is yours, proszę. I don't see Ms. Danuta in the hall. Okay, then we go further to Ms. Luz Martínez-Seyo. Dear Luz, the floor is yours.
Señora presidenta, señorías, hoy debatimos sobre migración, pero en realidad estamos debatiendo sobre qué sociedad queremos ser. Porque la forma en que tratamos a quienes llegan a nuestras costas define la calidad de nuestra democracia. Los datos son claros. Negar o dificultar el acceso a la sanidad a las personas migrantes vulnera derechos fundamentales y perjudica al conjunto de la sociedad. Por ello, garantizar el acceso a la sanidad a las personas migrantes no es solo una obligación moral, debe ser una exigencia legal y una necesidad de salud pública. Cuando se excluye, los problemas de salud se agravan, las enfermedades se cronifican y el sistema público se vuelve más caro e ineficiente. No lo digo yo, lo dice esta institución. La inclusión sanitaria es una inversión inteligente y una necesidad de salud pública. En España hemos reforzado un modelo sanitario universal y apostado por un modelo que reconoce la sanidad como un derecho, no como un privilegio vinculado al origen o a la situación administrativa. Y lo hemos hecho también pensando en los más vulnerables, los menores no acompañados, que no son cifras, sino niños y niñas que necesitan protección, educación, cuidado y oportunidades de integración. Ignorar esto no es firmeza, es abandono. Y frente a este enfoque, la derecha en nuestro país, del Partido Popular y de Vox, han acordado en sus gobiernos ejecutar su llamada prioridad nacional, un retroceso ético, jurídico y social. Rechazan el reparto solidario de menores entre comunidades autónomas, dejando a territorios de primera acogida, como Canarias, en una situación absolutamente insostenible. Las consecuencias son evidentes: más vulnerabilidad, peor integración y mayor tensión social. Defender los derechos de los menores migrantes no es ir contra nadie, es estar a favor de la Constitución, de nuestros compromisos internacionales y de la dignidad humana. Señorías, no se trata de elegir entre seguridad y derechos, sino de entender que sin derechos no hay verdadera seguridad. Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I now call into the debate Madam Alexandra Schools from Luxembourg. The floor is yours, dear Alexandra.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. The fundamental principle of universal access to emergency health care is not being questioned, but how we get there matters. And this report, while I believe well-intentioned, conflates humanitarian obligation with open-ended entitlement. The rapporteur is right that preventive primary care is more cost-effective than emergency treatment. The evidence from Switzerland and Germany is clear. Investing in early medical screening at reception centres is not generosity. It is responsible public health policy designed to protect everyone. However, and speaking for my party, a resolution that instructs member states to decouple health care access entirely from migration status, including for those who have entered illegally and are subject to return, goes further than what EU law requires and further than what democratic publics have mandated. In our view, the firewall provisions proposed in the opinion document would, in practice, make irregular presence status in Europe medically consequence-free. That is a policy choice that must be debated openly, not smuggled in through human rights language. My party also cautions against the blanket condemnation of return hubs and externalization. These instruments, where properly monitored, are a legitimate part of migration management. The Assembly should demand rigor and oversight and adequate healthcare standards within such facilities, not their abolition. Colleagues, let us pass a resolution that is credible, implementable and honest with our own citizens. Protect the vulnerable, yes. Guarantee emergency care, yes. But let us not pretend that unlimited entitlement, regardless of status, is without cost and without consequence in our countries. The right to health is universal. The right to remain is not. We can be humane without being naive, and this Assembly should have the courage to say so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Colleagues, I now call the next on my list, Mr. Mark Risch from Liechtenstein. Mark, the floor is yours.
Ich möchte bitte Deutsch sprechen
geschätzte Kolleginnen, vielen Dank an die Berichterstatterin für diesen Entschließungsentwurf, der durch seinen Detaillierungsgrad überzeugt und der viele Aspekte der erweiterten körpermedizinischen und psychiatrischen Grundversorgung Schutzsuchender adressiert. Die fehlende Gewährleistung eines Erkrankungsscreenings bei Schutzsuchenden und fehlende Zugänge zur Krankenversorgung zeigt sich nicht nur bei den dramatischen Zahlen der Müttersterblichkeit, sondern vor allem auch bei transgenerativen Komplextraumatisierungen bei Kindern auf der Flucht. Ich kann dies weder als Arzt und Psychiater noch als Sozial- und Gesundheitspolitiker akzeptieren. Noch weniger akzeptieren kann ich, dass sich schutzsuchende Mütter und Frauen prostituieren müssen und die Seelen ihrer Kinder vor unseren Augen zerbrechen. All dies passiert einfach jeden Tag vor unseren Augen. Der Bericht spricht von Angststörungen, Depressionen und posttraumatischen Belastungsstörungen bei Schutzsuchenden. Das Leid im Dunkelfeld geht deutlich weiter. Kinder mit schweren, traumaassoziierten, zwanghaften, dissoziativen und psychotischen Symptomen sind Opfer struktureller Krankenversorgungsprobleme, die wir zu lösen haben. Denjenigen, die sich gegen eine Verbesserung der Gesundheitsversorgung Schutzsuchender stellen und ihre populistische Paranoia vor Einwanderung in die nationalen Gesundheits-, Sozial- und Präventionssysteme immer und immer wieder ausbreiten, will ich zurufen. Screening, Frühbehandlung und Prävention sind immer preiswerter als späte Behandlung. Das ist weder links noch woke. Ich appelliere an die Menschlichkeit und an die Selbstverständlichkeit. Schutzsuchende benötigen unsere Hilfe, erkrankte Schutzsuchende umso mehr, ohne Wenn und Aber, denn schon morgen könnten wir selbst schutzsuchend sein. Und vergessen wir eines nicht, Flüchtlingskinder werden überproportional häufig zu Young Caretakers. Dies bedarf unserem speziellen Fokus. Sehr guter Bericht mit relevanter Detailtiefe. Danke.
Vielen Dank. The next on my list is Sandra Regol from France. Dear Sandra, s'il vous plaît, vous avez la parole.
Merci Madame la Présidente, chers collègues. Toutes les études scientifiques, économiques ou sociales le démontrent. Soigner coûte moins cher que laisser les gens sans soins, qu'il s'agisse de maladies ou de santé mentale. En fait, la solidarité, ça n'offre que des bénéfices. Et à Strasbourg, on dispose d'une sécurité sociale à 100%. On le sait mieux qu'ailleurs, puisque notre sécurité sociale est bénéficiaire. On dispose en France de moyens, en théorie, de soigner les personnes en situation de migration, mais la réalité de l'accès, elle, est bien plus complexe, pour le dire poliment. Le refus de l'État français, par exemple, d'assumer sa responsabilité d'accueil augmente les dangers qui pèsent sur la santé et la sécurité de ces personnes. Et par personnes, j'inclus aussi les enfants, les laissant dans des situations sanitaires encore plus dangereuses. Et vous le savez comme moi, en cette période de canicule historique, ce sont des vies qui sont en danger et ce laisser-aller est criminel. Ce rapport, en rappelant les enjeux, les difficultés et les valeurs fondamentales qui sont les nôtres, en retour est essentiel. Mais devoir aujourd'hui rappeler ces évidences devrait toutes et tous largement nous inquiéter. Ce rapport, il existe parce que l'extrême droite et ses réseaux pèsent sur nos valeurs, essayent de les détruire et tentent de les faire basculer jusqu'au plus fondamental d'entre elles, comme le droit à la santé et à la vie. Il y a quelques minutes encore, ici, l'extrême droite, au lieu de parler du sujet qui nous occupe, a préféré instrumentaliser des faits terribles pour essentialiser les personnes en situation de migration et faire croire que toutes seraient dangereuses par essence, par naissance, par leur ADN. Mais ils oublient ainsi facilement leurs propres membres qui sont condamnés par la justice de tous nos pays pour des violences, des agressions, des violences sexuelles, des meurtres ou plus loin dans l'histoire pour génocide. C'est un peu facile, chers collègues. Notre devoir n'est pas de faire le tri entre les êtres humains, nul ne choisit où il naît, ne choisit sa culture, la religion dans laquelle il est élevé, son statut social ou sa couleur de peau, mais bien de nous assurer collectivement que le droit à la santé de chaque personne est respecté. L'oublier, ce n'est pas seulement oublier nos valeurs, c'est oublier notre humanité. Merci.
Merci, Sandra. The next on my list is Georgios Stamatis, Greece. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to speak in Greek. Κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, επιτρέψτε μου να σας δώσω δύο αριθμούς. Τα τελευταία 8 χρόνια, 2,4 εκατομμύρια παιδιά στον κόσμο έχουν γεννηθεί ως πρόσφυγες. Αυτό σημαίνει 380.000 παιδιά το χρόνο γεννιούνται ως πρόσφυγες. Αυτός πρέπει να είναι ο οδηγός μας. Ποιος να είναι ο οδηγός μας? Γιατί αυτά τα παιδιά γεννιούνται ως πρόσφυγες. Ακούσαμε πριν να στοχοποιούνται οι πρόσφυγες και οι μετανάστες. Αυτές τις μέρες γίνεται το παγκόσμιο κύπελλο ποδοσφαίρου. Δείτε σε κάθε χώρα πόσοι είναι άνθρωποι που παίζουν ποδόσφαιρο και είναι μετανάστες. Και είναι περήφανοι για τον εθνικό ύμνο που ακούγεται στη χώρα στην οποία συμμετέχουν. Η Σύμβαση της Γενέβης καλύπτει όλα αυτά τα οποία λέει η έκθεση. Υπάρχει πλήρης φαρμακευτική περίθαλψη και ασφαλιστική κάλυψη για τους πρόσφυγες σε όλες τις χώρες. Αυτό όμως που πρέπει να δούμε είναι στο κομμάτι της μετανάστευσης. Δεν πρέπει να δημιουργηθούν εντυπώσεις για ένα ανοιχτό άνοιγμα καλέσματος στη μη νόμιμη μετανάστευση. Πιστεύουμε στη νόμιμη μετανάστευση με κανόνες. Αυτό που εμείς πρέπει να κάνουμε είναι να επενδύσουμε σε αυτές τις χώρες. Να επενδύσουμε πολύ σοβαρά. Δεν θα τους κερδίσουμε μόνο με τον πολιτισμό, θα τους κερδίσουμε στο να μείνουν αυτοί οι άνθρωποι εκεί να ζήσουν αξιοπρεπώς τη ζωή τους. Είναι μια έκθεση που προφανώς έχει πάρα πολλά θετικά στοιχεία και μιλάει για το αυτονόητο. Απ' την άλλη όμως θα πρέπει να δούμε το κομμάτι της μη νόμιμης μετανάστευσης. Σε κάθε χώρα, ο κάθε άνθρωπος που μπαίνει παίρνει ένα προσωρινό κωδικό και έχει μέχρι να εξεταστεί το άσυλό του. Πρέπει να είμαστε πάρα πολύ προσεκτικοί ώστε να μην δημιουργούμε εντυπώσεις στην ακροδεξιά για να μπορεί να βρει πατήματα εναντίον των μεταναστών και των προσφύγων. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Thank you, Georgis. I now call the next on my list, Mr. John Engen Helgelheim from Norway. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. We all agree on one fundamental point. Access to basic healthcare is an important humanitarian concern. But if this report is to be credible and sustainable, it must also recognize a reality that it currently avoids. Namely, the crucial distinction between those who are lawfully present and those who are not. Because without such a distinction, we risk undermining our migration systems. Those who have followed legal procedures, who have been granted protection or residence, and who contribute to society, they are in a fundamentally different position from those who have no legal right to stay. And even where the report refers to those lawfully residing, it is framed so broadly that it risks granting extensive rights regardless of contribution, work, or integration, something many of our systems are not designed to sustain. If we blur this line, we send the wrong signal. We risk creating incentives for irregular migration, and we making the legitimacy of return policies. We weaken the legitimacy of return policies. This is not about denying care. This is about defining it responsibly. Emergency healthcare and measures necessary to protect public health. Yes, that is a humanitarian minimum we can all support. But beyond that, member states must retain the right to prioritize, to set clear criteria, and to ensure sustainability. A fair system depends on clear rules, and clear rules require that legal status and genuine residence matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next on my list is Ms. Lindsay Farthworth, United Kingdom. The floor is yours, Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam President. The relationship between healthcare and the asylum system has become a point of political tension in the UK. The NHS is free at the point of use for all lawful UK residents, as well as asylum seekers and refugees. But it has been placed under increasing strain following years of underinvestment, resulting in increasing waiting times for tests and treatments. This has led to a growing feeling of frustration amongst some that their public services aren't working for them, and a building resentment at a perceived unfairness in the system, rooted in the idea that asylum seekers are adding to waiting lists and delays. Some say the answer to this disquiet is to not allow asylum seekers to access free healthcare, or worse still, not allow people to seek asylum at all. I say the answer is to join our healthcare and asylum policies up. The UK government has published a new 10-year plan to build an NHS fit for the future. It shifts the focus towards preventative treatment and primary care. These reforms, paired with a record investment, has seen the largest reduction in waiting lists for 16 years. Allowing asylum seekers to access primary care, support for trauma and preventative treatments such as vaccinations reduces reliance on costly emergency care and protects the wider community from communicable diseases. Simultaneously, the UK government has invested millions of pounds in processing asylum claims faster, so people spend less time waiting for decisions and are able to integrate quicker, work and contribute to society. These reforms recognise the core fundamental this report identifies. Ensuring asylum seekers and refugees have early access to healthcare is not only compassionate and morally correct, but also politically and economically pragmatic.
Thank you, Lindsay. The next on my list is Ms. Nerea Ahedo, Spain. Dear Nerea, the floor is yours.
Miren, hace 30 años yo trabajaba en Bilbao en Médicos del Mundo y dábamos cobertura sanitaria a la población migrante que no tenía acceso al sistema, solo a urgencias, atención en el embarazo y en el parto y atención pediátrica. Con médicos voluntarios se hacían pruebas en sus consultas, etc. Aquello duró poco porque el Gobierno vasco les integró en el sistema. En 2012, el Gobierno español, con el Partido Popular al frente, excluyó a los migrantes en situación irregular de la sanidad. Y el Gobierno vasco desoyó esta directriz y eso le supuso un recurso en el Tribunal Constitucional, pero el País Vasco decidió mantener nuestro modelo de asistencia. Así que pueden entender que para mí, que para mi partido, que la salud es un derecho no tiene duda. Y defendemos un sistema sanitario público, universal. Universal quiere decir para todos, y gratuito. Salud pública, por supuesto, pero sobre todo humanidad. Y aquí hay diferentes situaciones y necesidades. Quien llega por mar, en condiciones terribles, tenemos la exposición del Open Arms en la entrada, que necesitan una ayuda de urgencia, son los que llegan, pero que es distinto a quienes vienen en avión con un visado de turista o de estudios y que se quedan y pasan una situación irregular. Estos en España suponen el 90%, son los que están y que tienen que entrar en el sistema. Son además una población joven y sana que usa la sanidad mucho menos que la población autóctona, por más que la extrema derecha diga lo contrario. Y que creo que además tenemos que trabajar porque la utilicen más, porque muchas veces por desconocimiento, por costumbre, tienen bajas tasas, por ejemplo, de vacunación o usan más las urgencias que la atención primaria. Bien, yo voy a terminar diciendo que este es un buen informe. Se lo agradezco, señora Gillick. Seguramente mejorable, pero como todo en esta vida, es un buen informe. Y quiero recordar que para una sociedad cohesionada y democrática todos tenemos que tener los mismos deberes, pero sobre todo los mismos derechos. En este caso, el derecho a la salud y el acceso a la atención sanitaria, que es lo que el informe declara. Gracias.
Gracias. The next on my list is Antonio Mendonça Mendes. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. President, dear colleagues. I would like to underline that today we are discussing health policy. We are not discussing migration policy. Universal access to health care isn't a question. It's a fundamental right that has long been recognized by everyone. There are no exemptions. Should migrants and refugees have access to health care? Yes, of course. Should our healthcare system specifically address the issue of access to healthcare for migrants and refugees? That's our debate today. And I also think that the answer is yes. This is not about changing the structure of each national healthcare system, nor is it even less so about granting privileges to specific groups. It's about treating equally what is equal and addressing inequalities where they exist. Health care coverage has evolved significantly over the last century. Today, near universal coverage is the norm, including in the countries that rely on social insurance or private insurance models. Migration flows are driven mainly by economic factors. Many of our more developed societies are facing demographic decline. So let's face the problem with humanism, but above all with pragmatism on the basis of facts, not assumptions, and it's what this report does. Universal access to healthcare is a public health issue. It's a principle that we have long recognized and one of the must continue to guide our policies. We must ensure, therefore, that the reality of migration is properly reflected in our healthcare system. This means removing barriers. What is the cost of doing this? The cost of failing to act would be far greater. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I have noted that Mr. Larsen showed a blue card. Mr. Larsen, who do you want to ask a question for 30 seconds? Please indicate. Please, microphone, Mr. Larsen.
Oh, the man who just spoke is good.
Which member of the group, please?
The man who just spoke. I don't remember his name.
So Mr. Antonio Mendoza Mendes, please ask your question. You have 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, you talk a lot about giving migrants better access to health care. Well, what about the criminals? What about the rapists, the killers, the radical Islamists? Do you also want to give more health care paid by European taxpayers to those kind of people? Thank you.
Mr. Mendes, would you like to reply? If you wish so, you have 30 seconds, please.
Thank you, Mrs. President. The cost of failing would be far greater than acting. All human beings have the right of health care. All human beings, including you.
Thank you, colleagues, to stick to the time slots. To respect other colleagues, we will move ahead with the list. And now on my list, I have Ms. Meryem Göke from Turkey. You have the floor, dear Meryem. Teşekkür.
Thank you, dear President and colleagues. I would like to thank our rapporteur, Ms. Pelin Yılık, for a report that addresses an issue often discussed through statistics, but too rarely through the lens of human dignity. Behind every statistic is a human story. This report reminds us that migrants and refugees frequently arrive in Europe after enduring conflict, persecutions, exploitation, dangerous journeys, and several psychological trauma. Yet too often the barriers they encounter do not end at the border. They continue through administrative obstacles, language barriers, legal uncertainty, inadequate reception conditions, and limited access to essential services. Now, what I find particularly important in this report is its warning against policies that externalize responsibility while preserving the illusion of compliance. If Europe wishes to remain credible as a human rights defender, migration policies must provide both borders and human dignity. Women, girls, and unaccompanied children deserve special attention. Turkey understands these realities perhaps better than most. For more than a decade, my country has carried one of the largest humanitarian responsibilities in modern history, not because international law demanded it, and not because it was politically convenient, but because human conscience demanded it. While many debated burden sharing, Turkey acted. While many discussed solidarity, Turkey demonstrated it. Today, millions of displaced people benefit from healthcare, education, and social services provided by Turkey. The report itself acknowledges Turkey's good practices, including migrant health centers and measures facilitating access to health care. The world is witnessing devastating humanitarian crisis. Universal rights, including the right to health, cannot be defended selectively. Turkey will continue to uphold its humanitarian responsibilities. Thank you.
Teşekkürler. Next on my list is Mr. Francesco Verducci. Please, Francesco, the floor is yours.
Grazie Presidente. dobbiamo rigettare le provocazioni, i discorsi di istigazione all'odio che abbiamo sentito vergognosamente poco fa anche in quest'Aula e riaffermare con forza che tutti gli esseri umani, tutti, qualunque sia la condizione o lo status, devono poter avere il diritto di essere curati. Questo è un diritto umano universale che per nessun motivo può essere messo in discussione. Se lo facessimo tradiremmo non solo convenzioni, trattati, ma la legge morale millenaria dell'uomo. Questo è un tema identitario per l'esistenza stessa del Consiglio d'Europa, colleghi, di questa nostra Assemblea. Tutto quello che abbiamo conquistato ad un costo enorme sulle ceneri della barbarie è innanzitutto l'universalità dei diritti. Chi al contrario mette gli uni contro gli altri, i poveri contro coloro che sono ancora più poveri, lo fa con inganno. Migranti e rifugiati che vogliono venire in Europa, sono in fuga da guerre, violenze, disperazione. Tutti noi siamo migranti, figli di migranti. L'umanità intera è fatta di migranti. Il DNA di ognuno di noi testimonia una storia millenaria di migrazioni. Tutto il resto sono menzogne. C'è una frase della teologia cristiana che dice: i migranti sono il popolo di Dio in cammino. È una frase bellissima e vera. Eppure la politica va da un'altra parte, costruisce muri, esternalizza i migranti come fossero oggetti di scarto, li rinchiude fuori dai confini, in centri che in realtà sono prigioni. È una politica folle, cieca, di propaganda che ingigantisce i problemi anziché governarli, che distrugge i principi cardine delle nostre democrazie. Mai come oggi invece dobbiamo sentire l'urgenza, l'assillo civile e politico di costruire integrazione e cittadinanza, perché sono l'unico modo di costruire sicurezza e benessere per tutti. Grazie Presidente.
Grazie Francesco. The next on my list, colleagues, is Victoria Tiblum from Sweden, please.
Thank you, Madam President. No one in this chamber disputes that emergency and maternal care must be provided. That principle is not in question. What we do question is this report's leap from that principle to sweeping mandate for universal EU-directed healthcare, regardless of how a person entered our territory. Healthcare systems are built on national solidarity and finite resources and should be decided by member state, not this assembly. We should also be honest. In country after country represented here, our own citizens face long waiting lists and understaffed hospitals. Our own population health care needs must come first. I am also concerned that this report dismisses, almost in passing, the question of whether generous and unconditional access creates incentives that strain border systems further. We do not believe this question can simply be declared closed. A serious policy response demands that we examine pull factors honestly and assume them away, and not assume them away. On externalization, the answer is to fix the practical shortcomings on the ground, not abandon a model that allows for orderly, lawful processing outside our borders. And while we support protection for trafficking victims, unaccompanied children, and women facing violence, that does not require this Assembly to legislate away member states' right to control who enters and on what terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, last on my list is Takoy Hassan, and then we will proceed to the committees. Please, Mr. Takoy, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, distinguished members, access to health care is a fundamental human right. It is also essential for social cohesion, public health, and human dignity. Many migrants and refugees face significant barriers when seeking health care, including language difficulties, lack of information, administrative obstacles, and limited access to mental health services. These barriers can delay treatment, worsen existing conditions, and ultimately affect both individual well-being and public health. Particular attention must be given to the most vulnerable groups, especially women, girls, and unaccompanied children. Many have experienced violence, exploitation, trafficking, or severe trauma. Ensuring timely access to healthcare is therefore both a legal obligation and a moral responsibility. We must acknowledge the worrying rise of xenophobia, anti-migrant sentiment, racism, and Islamophobia across many parts of Europe. Such attitudes undermine social cohesion and create additional barriers to healthcare, education, and integration. I would also like to highlight the efforts undertaken by Turkey. For more than a decade, Turkey has hosted one of the largest refugees populations in the world, currently numbering close to 3 million people. Despite significant economic and social challenges, Turkey has provided access to healthcare, education, and a wide range of public services. The report itself recognized positive practices such as migrant health centers, the employment of Syrian healthcare professionals, and interpretation services that facilitate access to care. Migration is a shared international challenge and requires shared responsibility. By ensuring effective access to healthcare for migrants and refugees, we not uphold our human rights commitments, but also build healthcare, more resilient and more inclusive societies. Thank
you very much. Thank you. Colleagues, we now close the debate and it concludes the list of speakers. The speeches of the members of those speakers list who have been present during the session but were not able to speak can be sent to the table office for publication in official report. Speeches must not exceed 400 words, colleagues, and I remind that it has to be typewritten text which can be submitted electronically if possible. And then later, not later than 4 hours after the speakers list is interrupted. Colleagues, I now call Ms. Silik, the rapporteur, to reply. Ms. Silik, we have saved some time, so you have 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear Ms. Chairperson, dear colleagues, I carefully listened all of comments which are made by you. Thank you for this dynamic debate. I want to extend my deepest appreciation who provided contribution to this report. I also heard critics about it. I would like also thank Ms. Yulia Ovechnikova and beyond the Social Affairs Committee for the excellent and constructive committee opinion, which strengthened the resolution on key issues, primarily by referring to the European Social Charter. On the individuals covered by this report, I refer to people in need of international protection, refugees, asylum seekers, and other cross-border displaced persons who face a real risk of persecution, serious harm, or forcible return without adequate national protection. On externalization and return hubs, my position aligns with that the Assembly and other Council of Europe's institutions against such policies, which, as the draft resolution indicates, systematically restrict access to healthcare or shift protection burdens onto areas that lack the necessary infrastructure and safeguards. On the economic perspective, as I said earlier, people in need of international protection often delay seeking medical care for a range of reasons. Consequently, emergency departments frequently become the first point of contact with the healthcare system, and a substantial share of consultation and hospitalization costs could be avoided if earlier access to health providers were facilitated. On the so-called pull factor, we should cease to assume that facilitating access to public services, such as healthcare, would increase arrivals. People in need of international protection flee their homelands because of war, violence, persecution, and human rights abuses. On the contrary, evidence shows that integrated migrant health policies, procedure, financial, and public health benefits without creating migration incentives. On public health as a whole, the resolution is clear. Facilitating access to healthcare for people in need of international protection is also essential from a public health perspective. This includes integrated migrant health policies and investment in preventive and primary care, including in reception and detention centers, in so-called hotspots, culturally sensitive care, and in hospitals, including vaccination coverage and medical screening, including for transmissible diseases, as part of an arrival process for people in need of international protection. As an academician who is working on these issues for decades, I am aware of how complex healthcare management is. The diverse perspectives shared today reflect the complexity of the challenges we face, but more importantly, they highlight our shared commitment to human dignity and human rights. On the measures proposed in the draft resolution are essential to protecting vulnerabilities and strengthening public health. Migration process is a long journey. Especially to support them psychologically is significant. During this journey, we have children, women, handicapped women, elderly people. We do not forget them. To conclude, I would like to thank all of you, colleagues, for this rich and diverse debate. I count on your support for the adoption of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Ms. Hilik. Does the chairperson of the Committee on Migration, International Protection and Economic Cooperation wish to speak? Yes, I think so. Ms. Zampa, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes.
Esprimo semplicemente il mio apprezzamento e anche per la generosità e l'impegno con cui è stata svolta questo rapporto. Sono state richiamate tutte le ragioni per le quali l'accesso va garantito ai migranti, non solo per questioni che riguardano innanzitutto la dignità e il rispetto delle persone e dei loro diritti, alla vita in questo caso, perché quando parliamo di sanità parliamo di vita, ma anche per ciò che significa per la comunità che li accoglie. Evidentemente tutelare, come spesso avviene quando parliamo di solidarietà, tutelare gli interessi e i diritti di tutti significa tutelare l'intera società. Quindi grazie, la discussione è stata molto attiva e molto vivace anche in Commissione. Credo che Pellina abbia fatto un lavoro molto importante che oggi consegna al nostro voto e conto sulla comprensione e del valore delle cose che questo rapporto porta con sé.
Thank you, Madam President of the Committee, dear Sandra. The Committee on Migration, International Protection and Economic Cooperation has presented a draft resolution to which colleagues 9 amendments have been tabled. They will be taken in order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that the speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds only. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to the draft resolution document 16412, which are unanimously approved by the committee, be declared as definitely approved. Is that so, Madam Zampa? This is correct. Gracias. If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved. Is there an objection, colleagues? I see none. Therefore, amendments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to the draft resolution are approved and will not be called. We will need to verify that the objection... Sorry, there was no objection. The request of... I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 8 and 9 to the draft resolution...
Can I raise a point of order?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Just briefly, not all those amendments were passed unanimously yesterday. They may have been passed by a two-thirds majority, but they were not. I certainly voted against Amendment 6, and I thought that vote had been recorded.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for the point of order. I am referring to the information coming directly from the committee. Madam Chairperson, can you comment, please?
No. Credo che ci sia una confusione di fondo perché gli emendamenti sono stati votati questa mattina in commissione e gli emendamenti che sono stati recitati dalla Presidente sono stati tutti votati all'unanimità. Quindi non so, e neanche mi risulta che lei partecipi ai lavori della Commissione Immigrazione, probabilmente lei si riferisce ad un'altra commissione, ad un altro rapporto e ad altri emendamenti.
Okay, now it's very clear, colleagues, so we don't have a mistake. Therefore, I'm not mistaken either. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 8 and 9 to the draft resolution were rejected by the committee with the two-thirds majority and be declared as definitely rejected. Is that so, Ms. Zampa? This is correct. If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be rejected. Is there an objection, colleagues? We will now proceed and calculate if the objection is according to the rules of procedure. There are more than 10 members standing up, then the objection is accepted. The request of the committee is rejected, so each of the amendments will be taken individually. I call Ms. Gardini to support Amendment 9. You have 30 seconds, Ms. Gardini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Chairman. The return hubs have already been acknowledged in several Council of Europe documents, among them the Chisinau Declaration adopted by consensus by all member states on May 15, 2026, and in other documents, for example, the observation by the European Commission of Flaherty on the new EU regulatory framework, and they are already voted within the European Parliament. So I ask to support my amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Gardini. Does anyone wish to speak against, colleagues? I don't. No, we're. Colleagues, this is a very interesting debate. We have to come back to Amendment 8 first. But still, I call Ms. Gardini to support Amendment 8 first, and then what you have spoken on Amendment 9 already, we will do it gradually. Can you please support Amendment 8 first, please? You have 30 seconds.
It's the same. The reasons are the same because the paragraph is against the return hubs that, as I said, are already been approved in several documents of the Council of Europe and within European Parliament also.
Grazie mille. Colleagues, does anyone want to speak against the amendment? This is not the case. The committee rejected this amendment with two-thirds majority. Now, colleagues, I put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. Yeah, it's okay. I close the vote. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is rejected, colleagues. So now we come back to amendment number 9. Madam Gardini, I'm sorry, you need to present it again. Prego.
As I said, the return hubs are already voted and approved in Chisinau Declaration and in other documents of the Council of Europe, and also voted within European Parliament by several political families who are present here. And there is no doubt or distinction on the part of member states on this. Of course, in any case, the European Convention on Human Rights must be implemented everywhere, including in repatriation centers. So I don't understand the problem you have with this.
Grazie mille. Colleagues, the committee rejected this amendment with 2/3 majority. We'll go through the same procedure. I shall now put the amendment to... Excuse me. Does anyone want to speak again? To speak against? Madam President of the Committee.
Presidente, semplicemente voglio ricordare che non esiste nessun documento del Consiglio d'Europa che approva gli hub di rimpatrio, gli hub diciamo delocalizzati. Non esiste nessun documento. No.
Thank you for your comment. Although the committee rejected this amendment with 2/3 majority, and therefore I will put this amendment to the vote. Colleagues, the vote is open. Please vote. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. Amendment is rejected, colleagues.
Page 20.
Colleagues, we will now finally proceed to the vote on the resolution contained in document 16412, and a simple majority is required. I now open the vote. Please vote, colleagues. I now close the vote, colleagues, and I call the results to be displayed. The draft resolution in document 16412 is adopted, colleagues. Thank you. And we can breathe out.
The next item of business is the debate on the report titled Media Freedom in Sport, document 16415, presented by Ms. Toon Wilhelmsen-Trøen on behalf of the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media. In order to finish by 1 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 12:50 to allow time for the reply and the vote. I call Ms. Trøen rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to debate this afternoon.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to present this report on media freedom in sport, finalized over the following months after our last hearing in the committee in March. At first sight, sport and independent journalism may seem like very different worlds. One is associated with passion, competition and entertainment, the other with scrutiny, investigation and accountability. But in reality, they are deeply connected. Sport is no longer only what happens on the field. It is a global industry that shapes national identities, generates billions in revenue, and increasingly serves geopolitical ambitions and soft power strategies. This makes independent scrutiny more important than ever. And yet, throughout the preparation of this report, one message came back again and again. The space for independent sports journalism is shrinking. Access to athletes, competitions, and institutions is becoming more controlled. Accreditation systems are increasingly restrictive. Journalists are often required to sign agreements limiting the use of content or imposing on conditions that would be unacceptable in other areas of public interest reporting. In some cases, investigative journalists face intimidation, online harassment, and legal threats simply because they asked difficult questions. The de facto monopoly status of many sports organizations reinforces a culture where criticism is not tolerated. Too often, journalism is treated not as an essential democratic safeguard, but as a communication problem to be managed. We must also acknowledge the increasing political use of sport. When sporting prestige becomes too closely linked to political image, critical journalism may be perceived as damaging, not only to a federation or a sponsor, but to national prestige itself. Public authorities can therefore find themselves in situations of conflict of interest, investing public money in sport while not welcoming reporting on governance failures, corruption, or human rights concerns. This report makes it clear. Concerns about political prestige must never override obligations relating to media freedom and freedom of expression. The public has a right to know how sport is governed, how public money is used, and whether fundamental rights are respected. If anyone doubts that investigative journalism in sport still faces serious obstacles, they only need to look at last month. A whistleblower who exposed abuses linked to the Qatar World Cup was prevented from traveling to Norway to speak at the Oslo Freedom Forum. Our response was clear. Attempts to silence whistleblowers and journalists must be condemned. Transparency, accountability, and press freedom are essential in sport as in any democracy. The report also pays particular attention to the situation of women in sports media. Women remain underrepresented in sports journalism, especially in senior editorial positions and investigative reporting. Many face discrimination, harassment, and online abuse. Media freedom in sport cannot be fully achieved without greater equality and diversity within the profession itself. Our recommendations call on member states, sports organizations, and media actors to act together. We call for fair and non-discriminatory access for journalists to sporting events and institutions. We call for stronger protection of whistleblowers and journalistic sources, We call for safeguards against legal intimidation and political interference. We call for public funding in sport to be linked to standards of transparency and accountability. And we call for sports organisations to recognise media freedom not as a threat, but as a core element of good governance. Dear colleagues, sport has immense power to inspire and bring people together. We see this unfolding across the Atlantic as football players and fans from all over the world meet in the United States, Canada and Mexico in the FIFA World Cup. But precisely because sport matters so much, it must remain open to scrutiny. A healthy sports culture cannot exist without independent journalism. Transparency strengthens trust. Accountability strengthens integrity. And freedom of expression and strengthens democracy, also in sport. I will end by thanking the chair of the committee, Morgan Sensen, who actually started the work on this report. I will also thank the experts that has contributed with very good information and knowledge for the committee. And of course, I would like to thank the Secretariat for all their immense work together with us. I hope you will support the report. I hope we will have a good discussion, and I welcome the exchange of views. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Troen. I remind the Assembly that the speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for spokespersons for the political groups and 2 minutes for other members. I would like to ask all members to respect the time limit so everybody can speak before we close off the session. I will now call on behalf of the political groups, EPP, Mr. George Stammatis. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, dear President. Dear colleagues, sports journalism plays an essential role in our societies by informing the public, ensuring transparency and contributing to accountability in sports governments. As an organization committed to the defense of human rights, it is our duty to promote the protection of freedom of expression and freedom of information on the ground of sport journalism. In this regard, allow me, on behalf of the EPP, I warmly welcome this report and congratulate the rapporteur, Mrs. Troen, on her excellent job to such an important issue. Special emphasis is also placed on the persistent gender inequalities within sports media and on the need to strengthen the visibility, recognition and coverage of women in sport. Therefore, we strongly support the report which calls on Member States to safeguard freedom of expression and freedom of information in the field of sport, to guarantee fair and non-discriminatory access for journalists to sporting events and institutions, to strengthen the protection of whistleblowers acting in the public interest and to support investigate journalism. Furthermore, Member States are called on to ensure that sports organisations receiving public funding comply with standards of transparency, accountability and openness. Additionally, particularly important is the call to prevent and address harassment, threats and violence against sport journalists, both online and offline, of course. We also welcome the report which places emphasis on gender equality. Women remain underrepresented in sports journalism and continue to face structural barriers, discrimination and harassment. Promoting equal opportunities and great diversity within sports media is not only a question of fairness, it is essential for media pluralism and democratic debate. In the light of all these considerations, the EPP fully supports this report and I encourage all the colleagues to favour it in forum. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call for ECPA, Ms. Alexandra Sousa. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question today is not whether we want media freedom in sport. We all do. The question is which means are appropriate and who should decide. This report, in parts, mistakes more regulation and more public funding for more freedom. We disagree. A press that depends on public subsidies is not an independent press. It is a state-managed press under a different name. First, we fully support the fight against access restrictions imposed by powerful sports organizations. FIFA, UEFA and others have accumulated extraordinary market power. When accreditation becomes a tool to silence critical reporting, this is an abuse of monopoly power, and it must be challenged. Second, the report widely identifies the growing influence of state actors in sports governance. But let us be honest, the same logic applies to European institutions. When the Council of Europe prescribes how national sports media should be funded, structured and monitored, it too risks becoming an actor that shapes rather than protects independent journalism. Subsidiarity must apply here. Third, on whistleblowers and legal pressure, we agree that strategic lawsuits against journalists are a real problem. The anti-SLAPP framework is the right instrument, and we support its application. But the Rui Pinto case requires nuance. His disclosures raised matters of public interest, but the criminal law issues cannot be ignored. Protecting investigative journalism and legitimate whistleblowing must not erase the line between public interest disclosure and unlawful intrusion. Media freedom needs strong legal protection, but not a general exemption from the rule of law. Fourth, on the gender chapter, I am a woman in politics. I know what structural barriers look like, but mandating newsroom quotas via Council of Europe recommendations is not the answer. The solution is equal access to the profession, equal protection from harassment, and investment in training and mentoring, not top-down diversity engineering imposed from an international body. As ECPA, we want effective protection for journalists based on clear legal rights enforced by independent courts, not on new funding streams that create new dependencies. Dear colleagues, the ECPA group will engage constructively with this report. Sports journalism deserves better than becoming a new field for regulatory expansion. It deserves what all journalism deserves, the freedom to be inconvenient without asking anyone's permission. The best protection for a journalist is a guarantee that no one, not a sports federation, not a government, and not this assembly can silence them. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, on behalf of ALDE, Ms. Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo, you have 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, on parle beaucoup de sport washing. Très bien. Le concept est intéressant, utile même. Mais enfin, ne nous trompons pas de sujet, ou pire, ne faisons pas semblant de ne pas le voir. Le véritable scandale, celui qui mine en profondeur la crédibilité du sport et la liberté des médias, c'est l'existence de systèmes de corruption organisés, documentés, répétés. Les exemples ne manquent pas. Le scandale de ISL FIFA avec des pots de vin versés pour obtenir des droits marketing et audiovisuels. Le FIFA Gate de 2015 qui a révélé un système tentaculaire de fraude, de blanchiment et de corruption à grande échelle. Et plus récemment, des affaires impliquant des groupes audiovisuels dans l'acquisition de droits sportifs à travers des pratiques illicites. Et qu'est-ce que cela signifie concrètement? Cela signifie que l'attribution des droits télévisés, donc l'accès à l'information sportive, peut être biaisé, manipulé, faussé. Cela signifie que certains acteurs économiques ou politiques peuvent verrouiller le système. Cela signifie tout simplement que la concurrence est faussée et que la transparence disparaît. Et dans ce contexte, parler de liberté des médias devient presque théorique. Car de quelle liberté parle-t-on lorsque les médias subissent des pressions politiques pour protéger l'image d'un État? De quelle liberté parle-t-on lorsque les sponsors ou les organisateurs dictent ce qui peut ou ne pas être dit? De quelle liberté parle-t-on lorsque des journalistes s'autocensurent par peur de perdre leur accès aux compétitions ou à leurs sources? La concentration des médias entre quelques acteurs, la désinformation, les restrictions d'accès aux informations, les inégalités de couverture, tout cela participe d'un même problème, un écosystème où l'indépendance journalistique est fragilisée. Je ne parle même pas des pressions, des intimidations, voire des menaces dont peuvent être victimes les journalistes qui enquêtent sur ces sujets. Alors oui, le sport peut être un formidable outil de rayonnement, de cohésion, de diplomatie, personne ne le conteste. Mais lorsque le sport devient un vecteur d'opacité, un levier d'influence non transparent, ou pire, un terrain propice à la corruption, alors nous avons un problème politique majeur. Et il ne suffira pas de grands principes pour répondre. Il faut exiger de la transparence dans l'attribution des droits. Il faut protéger réellement les journalistes. Il faut garantir un accès équitable à l'information et surtout, il faut arrêter de fermer les yeux. Parce qu'à force de détourner le regard, ce n'est pas seulement la crédibilité du sport que nous affaiblissons, c'est aussi celle de nos démocraties. Le groupe ALDE va soutenir ce rapport et je remercie la rapporteure pour son travail.
Thank you. And now on behalf of UEL, Ms. Kortios-Sikokios, you have the 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the rapporteur for the excellent and timely report that you have created and made it for us. Allow me, colleagues, to continue in Greek. Ο αθλητισμός αποτελεί ένα από τα πιο ισχυρά κοινωνικά και πολιτιστικά φαινόμενα της εποχής μας. Ενώνει ανθρώπους πέρα από τα σύνορα, γλώσσες και κοινωνικές διαφορές, μεταδίδει αξίες όπως η ισότητα, η αλληλεγγύη και ο σεβασμός, ενώ ταυτόχρονα συγκεντρώνει τεράστιο οικονομικό και πολιτικό ενδιαφέρον. Ακριβώς γι' αυτό το λόγο, η ελεύθερη, ανεξάρτητη και πλουραλιστική δημοσιογραφική κάλυψη δεν αποτελεί πολυτέλεια, αλλά θεμελιώδη προϋπόθεση δημοκρατίας, διαφάνειας και λογοδοσίας. Οι αθλητικοί δημοσιογράφοι επιτελούν ένα κρίσιμο έργο. Δεν μεταδίδουν απλώς αποτελέσματα, αγωνιστικά γεγονότα, ιστορικές και γεωγραφικές πληροφορίες. Ερευνούν, αποκαλύπτουν, ελέγχουν και φέρνουν στο φως φαινόμενα διαφθοράς, χειραγώγησης, καταχρήσεων εξουσίας αλλά και παραβιάσεων ανθρωπίνων δικαιωμάτων μέσα στον αθλητισμό, ζητήματα που θα έμεναν στο σκοτάδι αν εμείς μέναμε στη βιτρίνα του αθλητισμού και στο Μουντιάλ που παρακολουθούμε το παγκόσμιο κύπελο, μεγάλες συγκεντρώσεις και απεργίες που γίνονται στο Μεξικό ή στην Αμερική για κρίσιμα κοινωνικά δικαιώματα δεν μεταδίδονται επαρκώς ή δεν μεταδίδονται και καθόλου. Σήμερα, ωστόσο, το έργο γίνεται ολοένα και δυσκολότερο για τους δημοσιογράφους. Η αυξανόμενη συγκέντρωση δικαιωμάτων μετάδοσης σε λίγους και ισχυρούς οικονομικούς παράγοντες, η εμπορευματοποίηση του αθλητισμού, οι περιορισμοί πρόσβασης σε διοργανώσεις, οι συμβατικές δεσμεύσεις καθώς και οι πιέσεις που ασκούνται σε δημοσιογράφους δημιουργούν ένα περιβάλλον που συχνά περιορίζει την ανεξάρτητη ενημέρωση. Παράλληλα, δεν μπορούμε να αγνοήσουμε τα περιστατικά εκφοβισμού, στρατηγικών αγωγών φήμωσης, τα λεγόμενα slaps, διαδικτυακών επιθέσεων και απειλών που αντιμετωπίζουν δημοσιογράφοι όταν ερευνούν ευαίσθητα ζητήματα στον χώρο του αθλητισμού. Ιδιαίτερα σημαντική είναι και η διάσταση της ισότητας. Οι γυναίκες εξακολουθούν να υποεκπροσωπούνται τόσο στα αθλητικά μέσα ενημέρωσης όσο και στην κάλυψη των αθλητικών διοργανώσεων. Η ενίσχυση της παρουσίας γυναικών δημοσιογράφων και η προβολή του γυναικείου αθλητισμού δεν αποτελεί μόνο ζήτημα δικαιοσύνης, αλλά και ζήτημα δημοκρατικής εκπροσώπησης. Από την πλευρά μας, λοιπόν, οφείλουμε να στηρίξουμε πολιτικές που να διασφαλίζουν την ελεύθερη και ισότιμη πρόσβαση των δημοσιογράφων στην πληροφορία, την αποτελεσματική προστασία των πληροφοριοδοτών δημοσίου συμφέροντος, την καταπολέμηση κάθε μορφής εκφοβισμού και βίας κατά λειτουργών της ενημέρωσης, τη στήριξη της ερευνητικής δημοσιογραφίας και την ενίσχυση του πλουραλισμού και της ανεξαρτησίας των μέσων ενημέρωσης. Κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, η ελευθερία των μέσων ενημέρωσης στον αθλητισμό δεν είναι επαγγελματικό αίτημα ή προνόμιο, δεν αφορά μόνο τους δημοσιογράφους. Αφορά το δικαίωμα των πολιτών να γνωρίζουν την ποιότητα της δημοκρατίας μας και την αξιοπιστία και την κοινωνική αποστολή του αθλητισμού. Γι' αυτό και η υιοθέτηση αυτού του ψηφίσματος καλεί τα κράτη-μέλη, και πολύ σωστά, να λάβουν ουσιαστικά μέτρα για τους δημοσιογράφους. Την πρόσβαση των πολιτών είναι θέμα ισότητας και κράτους δικαίου. Ευχαριστώ.
Thank you. And now on behalf of SOC, Ms. Agnes Sirka-Prammer, you have 3 minutes.
Dear colleagues, first, I would like to thank the rapporteur for this timely and well-structured report. Sport is highly visible, but visibility does not mean accountability. Independent sport journalism is not an accessory to sport. It is an essential part of democratic oversight. It helps the public understand what is happening behind the scenes, and it ensures that powerful actors of sport remain answerable and scrutiny. The report rightly reminds us that freedom of expression and freedom of information fully apply to sport. Journalists must be able to report on corruption, governance failures, discrimination, financial misconduct, and abuse of powers without fear of interference. That is true whether the issue concerns a local federation, a national association, or an international governing body. A striking example mentioned in the report is the Football League's investigation and the role of Rui Pinto. His disclosures helped bring serious wrongdoing in international football into the public eye. His case shows why investigative journalism matters. Without it, major abuses can remain hidden for years, and the public is left without answers. It also shows how important it is to protect whistleblowers and those who bring matters of public interest to light. As a subgroup, we therefore support fair and non-discriminatory access for journalists. Accreditation must not be used to control content. Contractual restrictions must not silence criticism. And journalists, sources, and whistleblowers must be protected, not punished. If access is turned into a tool of pressure, then the public loses independent information and sport uses credibility. We also welcome the report's strong focus on gender equality and diversity. Women remain underrepresented in sport journalism, and women's sport still receives far too little coverage. If we want real pluralism, we need equal opportunity, equal visibility, zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination. Diversity in the newsroom is not a side issue. It shapes what is reported and how sport is understood. Colleagues, good governance in sport requires transparency, and transparency requires a free press. That is why the SOC Group supports this report. Thank you.
Thank you. In the debate, I call next Ms. Lindsay Farnsworth. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. It is important that journalists are able to do their work freely, hold power to account, and investigate and expose wrongdoing with neither fear nor favour. The report underpinning this resolution makes clear that particular barriers sports journalists face in their work and references the work of the enlarged partial agreement on sport in 2019 on this area. It is pertinent to return to a paper commissioned by the Council of Europe as part of EPASA's work, which highlights the work of British investigative journalist Andrew Jennings. As many will be aware, he exposed corruption in the International Olympic Committee and later the International Football Federation. His motivation for pursuing these lines of inquiry take us to the heart of the resolution today, and I quote, "Sports organisations are in the public sphere. They're backed by public money. They wield power. Why should they escape scrutiny?" The UK has been home to a number of highly skilled sports journalists who have uncovered major scandals after years of persistence and tenacity. We must support journalists to this end, which is why the establishment and continued work of the National Committee for the Safety of Journalists in the UK remains vital. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the investigative work of journalist Daniel Taylor, looking into the circumstances surrounding the suicide of professional footballer Maddie Cusack, who was a constituent of mine and who played for the women's team at Sheffield United FC. Daniel's work with Maddie's family, also my constituents, and with campaigners has led to a formal inquiry by the Football Association into her death, and the outcome will be published later this year. I look forward to working with them further in relation to the findings of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jelizveta Jasko, you have 2 minutes.
Colleagues, arts and sports have been always linked to politics since the ancient Greek times. To be a good citizen always meant to be active in sports. And of course, those who would report about sports actually would have a direct influence on democracies. Unfortunately, media coverage of the sport is no longer so distant from many authoritarian regimes. And many authoritarian regimes are actually using sports and different sports federations, and they control the communication in it. I want to give some numbers that are very dramatic, that in the last years in Ukraine, at least 800 sports facilities, including huge football arenas, were fully or partially destroyed. there is almost a number of 700 sportsmen that were killed. Many sportsmen in Ukraine are serving in the army, and many actually sports journalists had to go and to work for defense. But I want all of us to imagine, how does it feel for a sportsman who, for instance, was always performing in such places as Donbass Arena in Donetsk? It was a beautiful, huge stadium built world-class level, and then your town, your house, your home is absolutely occupied, and your team is no longer representing, they cannot represent themselves in their own place. Imagine how does it feel for the spirit of the sports. So when we talk about the media freedom in sports, we always should remember where this media control and democracy is working together to actually ensure that we have freedom in our countries, which would be reflected in sports too.
Thank you. Mr. Joachim Vogt, you have 2 minutes.
Vielen Dank. Geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich möchte mit einer persönlichen Bemerkung beginnen. Ich hatte das Privileg, 4-mal an Olympischen Spielen teilzunehmen.